I lived through a one-in-a-million moment. My fake-sounding, real-life, impossible moment. My house was hit by lightning in the morning, and somebody robbed my house later that same day. All the electronics they stole were fried from the lightning strike. Task failed successfully, I guess. I was broke as a joke after a series of unfortunate events. My boyfriend and I managed to save up first and last month's rent just in time to not be homeless. We were on our way to give the cash, all of our money in the world, to our new landlord. A truck started aggressively tailgating us, honking at us and waving at us to pull over. We were on a lonesome country road. I pulled to the side to let him pass, and he kept pulling right alongside us. We were spooked, but this guy was persistent. When I finally fully stopped, he opened his truck door and waved my wallet with all of our money at me. It had flown off the dash when I made a turn, and he had picked it up and chased me down. It had no ID, just the cash. We would have never seen it again if he hadn't happened to be both behind us at the exact right time and a very good person. Years ago, I was working at a USPS distribution center, and a single piece of junk mail fell from a tray on the overhead conveyor system standing next to me. I picked it up to deal with it, and I was flabbergasted to see that it was addressed to my father. No one was around, and I seriously thought it was a joke. I put it back into the system, and it was delivered to our home a few days later. It had to literally be a 1-in-a-million chance. I went to check out a house for sale, and on the front porch I noticed a copy of a very niche newspaper which my family was a subscriber of. I was like, whoa, cool that someone else in the city gets this paper. I looked a bit closer, and it was our paper, addressed to our house. It had somehow been delivered to the wrong one in a different part of town, which I happened to walk into that day. That was just weird. I got my tiny drone caught in a tree once. It was stuck in the leaves real good. I was just getting ready to go home and find some long poles, but before I did, an owl swooped onto the tree branch, grabbed my drone, and dropped it to the ground in front of me. It was still quite light outside, so it was surprising to see him. I've been friendly with this owl for the last year. He's really sweet, loves to buzz my head during my night walks and land in a tree just outside of my arm's reach and observe me. He's even popped by my house while I've been walking my dog, lands in the tree right beside where we're walking. I swear they recognize faces. He had a mate last year, and sadly I found her hit by a car shortly after. He was hooting in the forest for a very long time. Real sad. Happily, he seems to have finally found another one. I want regular updates on the rest of this fine feathered fellow's life, because that's enough personality, charity, and tragedy to get me invested. Less potential for disappointment than humans, too. I work construction, so oftentimes there's garbage blowing or strewn about. I was on a raised platform, supervising about 10 guys. I noticed a lottery ticket on the ground. Didn't think anything of it. Probably a losing ticket that someone just threw away. The next day, I was in the same area of the building, and I noticed the ticket was still there. So I picked it up and scanned it. Where I'm from, we have an app that we can check if your lottery ticket is a winner or not. $500? A $500 winner? I couldn't believe it. My statistics final thesis was proving that the statistics of winning large scratchers is so slim, you're just as likely to find a winner as buy one, within standard deviation. Granted, it was much more than $500 in my thesis. In grade 2 and grade 9, I won one of those guess how many candies in a jar contests. The number, both times, was 146. Ooh, I love telling this story. I was dating a girl, and on our second date, she made me dinner at her apartment. Sometime during the evening, I walked around her place looking at the art she had on the wall. One print looked very familiar. She said she found it at a thrift store a few years back, and it was the first decoration she bought when she moved to this state. Then it hit me why it looked familiar. My grandmother had painted it. I'd been looking at the original my entire life. My grandmother was a prolific local artist, but it was the only painting she'd ever made into a print. Anyway, we've been married 16 years now, and the original piece hangs in our house. Had a paper route when I was a kid. Threw a paper towards the porch that was somewhat elevated from where I was passing on my bike, and it landed on end, standing up on the handrail. I mean, I bet you rode that high for weeks. I found my grocery list in the store when I picked up a bag of chips. It was behind the chips, and it was a list from about a year before that. I guess they clean those shelves only every few years or few decades. Ugh. My dad had a boat dry-docked in a boatyard when the Ohio River flooded in 1997. The boatyard did flood, and his boat, sitting on a trailer with the plug out, filled up with water. The sunk boat was mostly underwater for days. After the water receded, we went out to survey the damage. The boat was still on the trailer, but it was done for. It stank, was filthy, all electrical, engine and water lines and stuff were destroyed. Upholstery in the cabin was gnarly. There was a clear watermark at about 6 feet up the cabin wall. But somebody had broken in and stolen a radio and all of the speakers, the cooktop and the little TV. All clearly below the watermark. Enjoy your trash, moron. I mean, they also took a dump on the floor, but given the floodwater smell, that was hardly noticeable. Took a PATH train to New York from Hoboken a long time ago, and it was a $1 fare and the machine didn't accept change. The train arrived and there was a guy in a panic because he only had change. I gave him a $1 bill and he insisted I take his change, which I didn't want to, and he apologized that it was only 90 cents. I laughed, but he was sincerely apologetic. The train makes about 5 stops and ends at 33rd Street, New York City. I spent the whole day there and was traveling back to Hoboken from 33rd Street. At 14th Street, the door opens and a guy I didn't recognize gets on heading back to Hoboken. He smiled and said, "I always pay my debts," and hands me a dime. It took me a split second to realize who he was, and we had a good laugh. Once I went to the WTC tickets booth to get 2 cheap tickets for the play, Proof with Mary Louise Parker. No tickets that day, so on the way back uptown, I got a scratch-off win for life that netted me $2.5 grand. I went straight to the Walter Kerr, now the James Earl Jones, and bought 2 center-row orchestra seats at full price to see that night's performance of Proof. Frickin' magic. I saw a dead body in a large lake, called it in at the shore, they came out, they never found the body and tried to say it was a hoax. It's been 25 years since and still not found. It was 100% there, it was a human body and I saw her water-bloated face. She was just under the water. At a zoo as a teenager, I walked by the orangutan exhibit. It was open air, but there was a barrier. As I'm walking by, a rock hits the ground next to me. I look around and a goddamn orangutan is laughing at me. I pick up the rock and toss it to him. He catches it deftly and then just throws it lightly back to me. This turned into a game of catch for a few minutes. No one believed me when I got home. Dad called me a liar and actually grounded me for making crap up. Flash forward a few years and we go to the zoo with my family. Guess who remembered me and wanted to play? Vindication. I was at a holiday party that had door prizes. When it was time for the draw, I decided to be funny, and as soon as they read the first digit of like the 6 or 7 digit ticket number, I yelled, "I won!" And I got my laughs. And then it turned out I actually won the prize. I feel like the universe turns up the probability when we say or do things like this just to mess with us. Saying, it's a 1 in a million chance it'll never work, or joking about something being certain, when everyone knows it's a lost cause, is how you make it happen. But the thing is, you can't say these in the hope of it working. That's cheating. The universe is annoyingly pedantic about these things. In January of 2021, my partner and I were verbally and physically attacked by a drunk horde of Amish people on a beach in Florida. My wife hit a hole-in-one her first time on a golf course. Barely swung a golf club 100 times. I mean, we have a video driving up, but nobody believes it at first. My 5-year-old got 3 strikes in a row the first time she ever went bowling. She's lucky. I ordered a used paperback of To the Lighthouse online and received the exact copy I'd donated to the bookstore in the small town I grew up in. 15 years had passed. The name was on the inside cover and I had some marginalia written lightly in pencil. Wife and I were going through our Pokemon cards one day and organizing them into a shared binder. She had so many more than me because most of mine were stolen from a bully of mine back in elementary school. When we were looking through them, I noticed on a few of the cards something I did when I was younger. I left little nail imprints on the corners of my cards so I'd know which were mine when I used to play and trade. I asked my wife where she got those cards, as all of those nail-printed cards were the same that were stolen from me. She says, "Oh, some kid back in elementary school used to have a crush on me and he gave me these cards." I asked what his name was, and she says, "Matt S., my frickin' elementary school bully." So my wife and I went to completely different schools on opposite sides of the same town. She moved to California, came back to New York for a week to visit parents. 2 days before going back to Cali, we randomly met at mutual friends' houses in our mid-20s. Hit it off, got married 2 years later, Bought a house, decided to combine our cards to decorate the game room, and now I have all of my old Pokemon cards back. We were meant to be together. The wife and the cards. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? In the early 90s, I was in Manhattan and taking one of those elevators that's glass and overlooks a large atrium. About 30 or so floors up, it stops and the power goes out, meaning the little phone or alarm thingy doesn't work. We're all smashed in there like, well, an elevator in Manhattan at rush hour. After half an hour, people really start getting uncomfortable. And after an hour, people start freaking out. No one's coming by and no one's hearing us shout. Then, about 90 minutes in, two guys start walking in our direction and we start pounding on the glass and yelling. They walk over and when they do, I can see it's George Wendt and John Ratzenberger. That's Norm and Cliff of Cheers fame. At the time, the show had just had its series finale and was one of the most popular shows on Earth. They come over, pry the doors open, just enough to talk to us, learn that we're stuck, and they get help. When we got out, we learned they were staying in that building and were there with the whole cast for some sort of press-related event to the show ending. Minutes later, Ted Danson comes out of his room to join the fun. All three were so incredibly nice and took pictures with everyone. Out of all the people in that city, we were saved because Cliff and Norm happened to be heading to their room and saw us. After my divorce, I was planning to get a dog for the kids, but I needed to move house and get the yard fenced in first. So we'd borrow a dog from the local shelter for a day, for fun, and get them used to being around and caring for a dog. The shelters liked to get them out for exercise and socialization this way. We did this several times with different dogs before the time was right and we finally adopted one. A few years later, I met the woman who'd be my new wife. She'd also been going through a divorce and at times was keeping the dog she and her ex had adopted together while he was traveling or whatever. So I'd sometimes see this dog at her place when we were together, which looked strangely familiar to me. Looking back through photos, we confirmed I had pictures of her dog with my kids from years before we even met. I worked at this restaurant that kept crayons on the tables, and servers would use them to write their names on the paper tablecloths as a sort of gimmick. One time, after closing, I was doing some end-of-shift duties and just chatting with a coworker. The way I was standing, I had my palms out resting against the wall as I was kind of leaning on it. From across this open-floor restaurant, had to have been 40 to 60 feet away from me, one of my coworkers yelled something like, "Heads up!" or "Incoming!" Can't remember exactly which, it's been 20 years. Anyways, he chucks a crayon my way, and he manages to toss it right into the very small space between my hand and the wall I was resting it against. I didn't so much catch as I did just apply a little more pressure against it as I felt it slide into my hand. Neither of us could believe it. He was a baseball pitcher, so maybe that played into it, but even he was dumbfounded at his accuracy. Went to Europe 4 times. Trip 1, I broke my ankle. Trip 2, plane crash. Landing gear caught fire when we landed hard and had to evacuate. Trip 3, this was pre-COVID, I was exposed to infectious diseases and the public health department quarantined me at home when I got back. Trip 4, Paris terror attacks. And I felt like my coincidence of nearly being hit by a tram in every major city in Europe was an accomplishment. But I guess that's just down to stupidity, and any idiot could do that if they tried hard enough. Yours was incredible, tragic coincidence, after your first incident. No one believes that I came face to face with the serial killer Israel Keyes. He tried to get into my house by pushing his way in. At the time, I thought it was some college kid whacked out on mushrooms or something. I lived in South Burlington, Vermont, and the next day Bill and Lorraine Currier went missing. I actually have only told one other person about this. I had no idea they were connected until a few years later, and I saw a show about him and I immediately recognized him. It was so chilling to see that same face again. I don't tell people because I don't think they'd believe me. When I was young, I'd take a ferry over the Oslo fjord to my summer cabin. It was an old and tiny ferry called Bastøyferjen, and I probably took it 6 times before it was replaced with a new electric ferry. Skip to about 10 years later, I was driving my family along the Sunshine Coast out in Nowhere, Canada, with a couple of small ferry crossings along the way. One of those ferries seemed very familiar, but I didn't get why. My mother jokingly pointed out it looked very similar to the Bastøy ferry, but we didn't believe it actually was, maybe just a similar model or something. Then we found an info placard on the boat saying it crossed the Atlantic 10 years ago from Norway, where it previously shuttled across the Oslo fjord. It was the exact same ferry. My car stalled out in the middle of a very busy road, so I was trying to push it into a gas station parking lot with the help of a good Samaritan. The car got going too fast, I fell and got dragged by my car for a few feet. Then, while laying in the middle of the road, I watched my car careen in the opposite direction of the gas station, pass right in front of my face, go through 5 lanes of traffic and over a median. While my car was going over the median, the Good Samaritan ran through traffic, jumped into my car, and steered it safely into a parking lot. I jumped up and ran across the road to follow her. I had some bruises and road rash, but didn't die, and she saved my car. I can't imagine that series of events is very common. Not just a Good Samaritan, the greatest Samaritan. Action Samaritan. I got something like 20th in the entire state on a statewide multiple-choice math test given to all 7th graders, where students were explicitly allowed to use a basic calculator. The 1 in a million part is that I left my calculator in my locker, and my teacher wouldn't let me get it. I know, right? So I ran out of time and had to blindly guess on the last 5 questions. I got 4 of them right by pure chance. I was a shy kid, but I absolutely reminded my teacher that she didn't let me go back to my locker for my calculator after the results came back. About 20 years ago, I hit the black 8-ball in from the break in pool 3 times in a row. I was driving on a 2-lane road going about 50 miles per hour. Guy in front of me in a car with T-tops. Wind blows his hat off. I caught it out of my driver's side window. He watched through his rearview mirror. We both pulled over and I gave him his hat back. When I was 14, my next-door neighbor was 12. We had our first kiss behind her dad's car. Soon after, they moved away and our romance was donezo. Until 45 years later when we reconnected on Facebook. I posted that I was going to Mexico and she replied, "I want to go." 45 years between our first and second kiss. Now, 51 years after our first kiss, we married on a beach in Cozumel, living our best life. The first person I kissed will be the last person I kiss. I was killing time in the library, worrying about paying bills, and I found 8 $100 bills laid neatly behind the cover of The Tao of Pooh, which is basically an introduction to Taoism focusing on the character Winnie the Pooh as an example. I stuck the cash in my pocket, checked out the book, and went to pay the electric and insurance. I was at the British Embassy in LA for a party honoring the engagement of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. They did a drawing for hundreds of guests where one person and their guest would win a trip to London. Flights, luxury hotel, the works. I turned to my husband and very dramatically said my name in an announcer voice, and then 2 seconds later, they called my name. Hey, it happened a second time. But as I said, folks, if there's even a nagging, hopeful thought in your head that you can tip the scales of fate by pretending to dismiss your chances, it won't happen. These things only happen when we 100% believe that we have 0 chance. I worked on the grounds crew at a golf course in my early 20s. I was mowing the practice green that was up by the clubhouse. There was a paved path that went up a fairly steep hill to get to the clubhouse from 18, and a small pond just off that path. My superintendent had parked near the plateau of the hill, only a very small grade downhill, hopped out and ran into the clubhouse. During my last pass of the practice green, I noticed movement in his cart. The parking brake had apparently come undone, and the cart began rolling down the hill, aiming straight towards the pond. I turned off my mower and began sprinting towards the cart as it was picking up speed. Just barely managed to hop in the cart, mash the brakes, and get it stopped. He walks out of the clubhouse before I'd even got off the cart and asks what the frick I'm doing in it. I explain the previous 30 seconds, and he doesn't believe a word of it. Probably still wouldn't, but it did happen. Probably the only time in my life I felt like an action movie hero and never got a wink of credit for it. Back in the mid-90s, I was a realtor. I was on the way to one of my listings to open it up for another realtor to show it to her client. It was during the Winter Olympics, and while I was driving, I started thinking about figure skating, which I always enjoyed watching. I started nostalgically remembering the Calgary Olympics in '88. I'm Canadian, and how thrilling it was to watch Elizabeth Manley skate a brilliant routine which was one judge away from winning gold. I started fantasizing about how if I ever met her, I'd tell her how proud Canada was of her and how incredibly exciting her performance was. I got to the house and the other realtor arrived and introduced me to her client. It was Elizabeth Manley. I was too gobsmacked to tell her anything I'd been fantasizing about telling her, But I did get her autograph, which wasn't very professional of me, but I didn't care. I was in New York City back in the 1980s at the 50th anniversary of King Kong, and I saw the life-sized Kong balloon break away from the Empire State Building and fly towards Central Park. Nobody believes me. I was walking along the harbor of Vancouver at midnight, and a raccoon scaled up the wall and was walking beside me like a dog for about 20 minutes.
People who grew up with strict parents, what was their most unreasonable rule? I was called at a friend's house at 11 p.m. at night because I left 2 t-shirts slung over the chair of my room versus hanging them in my closet. I had to go back to my house and then I was grounded for a week. Upon getting home, my mother had gone through my entire room and tossed every item out of my dresser. She claimed they were messily put in the dresser. Fun stuff. My mom was very strict about the rating of movies and video games. One year for Christmas, a relative gave me a copy of Star Wars Shadows of the Empire for the Nintendo 64. It was a T for teen rated game and I wouldn't be turning 13 for another 4 weeks. My mom had my dad drive me to Toys R Us to return the game. We walked into the store and over to the games counter and he had me pick out an E for every one rated game. We proceeded to the checkout and as we went to the car, he handed me not only the new game but the game we were supposed to have returned to buy it as well, and told me not to let her catch me playing it. My mom's curfew was 7 p.m. and her brother's was 12 a.m. Her brother was about 2 years younger than her, and my granddaddy's logic was that girls get themselves into more trouble than boys. My poor mother only ever attended church functions for fun until she graduated from high school. My stepmom decided that I was using too much shampoo. She would get a little medicine cup before my shower and pour the designated amount into it. It wasn't ever enough because I had hair down to my butt. I also wasn't allowed to use conditioner. When I was in 5th grade, I wrote some stuff in my diary about masturbating, and a month later, my mom went through all my stuff. She would randomly go into my room and tear it apart, and I'd always get in trouble for something. And then I'd have to clean up the mess and be grounded for whatever amount she felt like that day. So anyway, when she found that diary entry, she picks me up from school and won't talk to me. I get home, my door was removed from my room, that diary entry was taped on the wall, and I was threatened with a belt if I didn't answer all her invasive questions. It was pretty messed up. Wow, yeah, this one just takes invasion of privacy to a whole new level. I was/am not allowed to do the following: use the washing machine, wash the dishes, pull the weeds, vacuum outside of my room. I must ask to use the vacuum. I can't cook a meal. I can't have the remote. I get instructed on how to use the microwave that I've been using for years. And if I ask where we're going, I get told out, and I have to dress in jeans, a shirt, and running shoes no matter how hot because he doesn't like shorts, and no jacket no matter how cold. This one sounds like borderline child abuse. We could not listen to music with guitars in it. I'll never forget the day my brother was listening to Sabbath Bloody Sabbath and my father took the radio and threw it through the window. Spent my childhood listening to Richard Marx and Michael Bolton. Thanks, Dad. We couldn't go sledding during the winter, or any other season obviously, because my mom was a neat freak and didn't want to get snow slogged into the garage. So no snow playing of any kind, really. Never built a snowman. Did get to go sledding though when I was an adult, and it's pretty great. All of our clothes in our closet had to be arranged by color, descending in order by shade. So for example, midnight blue at one end of the blue section and tar heel blue at the other. And there was a system in place for colors too. So if the yellows were by the purples, for example, there'd be hell to pay. No shoes on in the house under any circumstances. Was super uncomfortable when my brother's friend who had prosthetic legs and always had shoes on came over and didn't take his shoes off. Mom got really mad and confronted him. No Legos or puzzles allowed as they make messes and look like disorder, and I love puzzles as an adult, one of my favorite hobbies. 30 minutes of internet time a day, and 99% of the time that was supervised, as in mom looking over my shoulder and commenting on conversations. We had web TV, and when they weren't home, they would literally lock the keyboard in a toolbox. My sis and I could never have friends over because the house is a mess, and no amount of cleaning satisfied mom because the real reason was she wanted to be able to fight with my dad at will. I had to write essays on TV shows that I wanted to watch in order to have them unblocked by the parental controls. I remember writing a riveting piece on the educational and cultural benefit of Disney's That's So Raven. Also, I wasn't allowed to watch PG-13 movies even after turning 13. Wasn't allowed to rest my head on my hand with my elbow on any table while there was also food on that table. If my parents found out I was going too fast in my car, small town, so other parents would snitch on me pretty regularly for going over 10, I had to pay my parents speeding tickets. Also, they would make me pay for the whole family's phone bill if I texted a boy. By the time I moved out at 17, I had given them well over $1,000 in punishment money earned at the Sonic Drive-In. I was not allowed to talk to boys. One Christmas Eve day, I was doing last-minute shopping in the downtown of our little town. I ran into 2 male friends from my German class and we talked for several minutes and wished each other a Merry Christmas. Oh, I was 15 at the time. My older sister drove by and saw me and told my parents I was hanging out with boys. When I walked in the house, both of my parents were waiting and the yelling began. Some Christmas Eve. I was from a large family and discipline was very strict. If myself or one of my siblings broke one of the major rules, my parents would hold a truth session. All the children would be brought to my dad's study where the guilty party would be given an opportunity to confess. If nobody came forward, we would be hit in turn in order of ascending age. The eldest 4 were hit with a sewer rod while, in deference to their age, the youngest ones would get a whack of a bamboo stick. A sewer rod is basically a 4-foot long flexible rubber rod around an inch thick with a metal cap. It would leave the most remarkable welts. Horrendous things, really. Anyway, this would continue until someone admitted their guilt. At that point, they would receive the blows that everyone else had received to that point. So that was awful. I fully acknowledge that. I'm under no illusions. However, that wasn't the actual unreasonableness. No, the unreasonable part was that the person who caused the truth session didn't always receive the accrued punishment owed for having their siblings beaten. Sometimes they could just be let go, making their siblings hate them for causing pain to them. There'd be no explanation. The study door would be opened and we'd all be told to leave. That meant you could be rewarded for holding out and avoiding the punishment you'd definitely get if you admitted it at the beginning. My parents now tell fun stories about how when I was a child and I'd done something wrong, I'd always begin with, "Let me tell you my story." Ha ha, they chortle at my childish phrasing while I recall the terror that such an approach was meant to stave off. There were a lot, but the most ridiculous one to me was that they didn't want me volunteering during high school. I was visiting the elderly and they said it was too dangerous to be around strangers like that and the time was taking away from my studies. Most extracurriculars I wanted to do they had a huge problem with, but it didn't hit me how absurd it was until it was about senior citizens. My father was very, very strict. I wasn't allowed to have alone time with my mother. He beat the crap out of me constantly. But the oddest thing that still bugs me to this day is that he would burn all my things as punishment. And I get it, seeing my toys and valuables burning sucked, and I probably learned some lessons. But he not only burned toys, he would burn everything. Every year or so for school, we would go and buy me new school clothes and shoes. He would burn those, like sometimes days after he bought them. At 8 years old, I remember thinking, you now have to buy me more clothes. But that wasn't the point, I suppose. He once took me to the Palace of Auburn Hills in Detroit to see the Globetrotters one year, and during the night, he bought me a Globetrotters basketball and jersey. We had a really fun night. The very next day, I had left something on the floor in my room, and his punishment, among other things, was to burn the basketball and jersey he bought for like $150 less than 24 hours earlier. It just never made sense to me. My friends would joke about it all throughout middle and high school. I was not allowed to wear makeup or shave until 16. My mom was controlling about food. Everything was kept track of. I had to be in marching band in order to get my permit. I had a job, but even if I worked a second shift, which I did, and came home at 11, I would have to clear the plates from the table for the dinner that they ate. If I asked to hang out with a friend in the presence of said friend, the answer was automatically no. I was only allowed to do things if the friend or their parent was paying for it. The straw that broke the camel's back and ultimately made me move out at 16 was that I had to live like a boarder. Showers cost $5. A load of laundry was $1 for washer, $1 for dryer. Telephone time, 25 cents per minute. Wow, I feel like that's really taking things to an extreme. The parents must have been flat broke themselves and in desperate need of money or something. No trends or passing fads. Pokemon, banned. Barbies, banned. Beanie Babies, banned. PlayStation/Game Boys, banned. Anything particularly fashionable or popular, regardless of actual merit, was met with derision and we'd be mocked for even suggesting interest. We were achingly frumpy kids with interests in cultural references or lack thereof that isolated us from our peers, and they wondered why each of us were bullied. My parents were pretty slack, but my best friend's parents were so strict. She would escape to my house for freedom. It's 12th grade and it's prom. Her parents allowed her to go to prom, but said she wasn't allowed to dance. We all went to prom and had fun dancing, until she saw her parents standing at the back watching. She then moved out for university. After her first year, she came home to work for the summer. She'd been on her own for a year and supporting herself, and her parents gave her a 9 p.m. curfew. She spent a lot of time at my house that summer. She was married by the next summer and didn't have to deal with it. Individuality was almost a cardinal sin in my parents' house. You wear what they like. You eat what they like. You do what they like. You do not, under any circumstances, act like a human being with hopes, dreams, and opinions. My mom was insanely controlling about food. Weird rules were in place, like 1 slice of lunch meat per sandwich. No one but her was allowed to cook. She made 1 giant batch of spaghetti or something, and we'd have leftovers for days, so she only had to make dinner twice a week. She didn't work or anything, just didn't like cooking every day. Breakfast was cold cereal, and you'd only be allowed a small bowl with just enough milk to moisten it. Occasionally, she'd bake something called corn toasties, which was simply cornbread baked in a sheet pan. She'd cut them into squares and fill the freezer with them, and we could have one of those for breakfast as an alternative. Once, when I was 14, I bought a pack of hot dogs at the store, snuck them home, and lit the grill. I was almost done cooking them when she came out screaming about fire hazards and swatted the plate out of my hand. She'd been making spaghetti. What an ungrateful little bastard I was. So then she orders a pizza for the rest of my family, wraps individual servings of spaghetti in freezer paper and puts them away. She tells me that I will be eating nothing else until it's all gone. Took about 2 months to choke it all down. Went without eating a lot of days. I was also grounded for over a year. But I sure learned a lot about consequences. I wasn't allowed to go out. Like, ever. If I was going to hang out with someone, it had to be on the weekend, planned at least a week ahead, and my parents had to meet their parents and drive me there. They would come get me before the sun went down. Not a rule, but if I got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night or was reading because I couldn't sleep, my mom would come screaming up the stairs, "Why are you up?" and sometimes hit me. I wasn't allowed to close the door in my room. There's more, but that's all I can think of right now. Mostly my mother would just yell about everything. Not my parents, but my high school friend had very strict parents. This was shortly after 9/11 and the anthrax scare. It was Halloween evening and a group of us were supposed to head out and light fireworks around the neighborhood. Well, my friend wasn't allowed to come out that night because his mom was worried about terrorists bombing our country with anthrax. We live in Canada. Was forced to drop out of high school in the 5th grade because my grandmother believed that most people have no souls and were demon-possessed. She said that the world was unsafe to roam freely because Satan was trying to corrupt God's children. This led to a very sheltered life and very silly things like having to pray over every individual item that entered the house. Food, toiletries, dish soap, you name it. I'd get woken up at 2 a.m. to be screamed at for over 3 hours over something God had told her that I did wrong. So yeah, I guess the most unreasonable rule I grew up with was not being allowed to leave the house. Not my parents, but my best friend's parents were insanely strict growing up. When we were preteens and sleepovers were all the rage, if we wanted to have one, we literally lived on the same street, it's a 2-minute walk between our parents' houses, we had to plan it at least a month in advance, if not more. Even then, for whatever reason, her parents would only agree to them rarely. So really, we only get to have like 2 or 3 a year. One time I started getting sick at school on a Friday and we'd planned a sleepover ages ago as usual for that night. I was feeling absolutely awful but tried my best to stay at school because obviously if I went home sick, the sleepover would be called off. Made it to lunch and then the teacher called me over and said I was white as a ghost and burning up and had to go home. My best friend and I were devastated. Sad day. My dad was a narcissist. Biggest rule in the house was not to make any noise around him. If he was home, the whole house got quiet and tense. Even my mom used to eat her cereal in the bedroom because she'd get in trouble for chewing crunchy food. Now she's long rid of him and married to a way better guy, but she still apologizes for eating crackers. In the 1970s, my extremely conservative Mormon mother would take the masks out from grocery store plastic Halloween costumes. those wretched ones with thin elastic string to hold them on, and widen the eye holes with scissors as much as she could without destroying the mask. When we asked why this was necessary, she informed us that in our church, we don't like masks because it was a group of masked men who murdered Brother Joseph. So we want to be able to see your face clearly enough, even if your Halloween mask's on. Totally pointless and ineffectual dogmatism, except that whatever that is was never any kind of LDS dogma. I was interested in learning about Wicca because I was young and in high school, early 2000s, when Harry Potter was still happening and all that stuff. My mom and stepdad found out by reading an email I sent to my cousin. It was the summer and they freaked out, took everything. I couldn't read, I couldn't listen to music, I couldn't watch TV or movies with the family, I couldn't hang out with friends, couldn't talk to my cousin anymore. Basically, anything that might bring me pleasure was taken. They made me do chores all day, would go on family outings without me, and soon I became a shell of a person. I started having a lot of bad thoughts that made me really scared and I decided not to go through with. So I turned myself off. They hated it. They weren't getting a rise out of me anymore. Anything they said to me. Since their narcissism relied on a victim, I wasn't a source anymore. So they extended my grounding even further. They could have told me to go pick up dog poop in the backyard with my teeth and I wouldn't have flinched. My stepdad's family, just as terrible, would come over and belittle me as well. I was told to smile. So I'd humor them and flash an empty smile for a second and return to my blank expression I had to find solace in. All this was to save me from going to hell. The only thing that saved me that summer was my visitation with my dad. My mom and stepdad tried to paint him in a bad light, like he was the abusive one. Even as a kid, I knew my dad didn't make me feel as bad and empty as they did. I eventually got through it. Years later, about 4 years now, I ended up working at a job unexpectedly with a girl I used to play with in the neighborhood. I always wondered why she stopped showing up. When I wasn't home or in another part of the house, she came to the door and asked to play. One of my parents opened the door and told her I didn't want to play with her anymore. I always wondered why she never hung out with me or talked to me. Even finding this out in a more recent term, I cried and apologized to her. I could have had a great friendship with a lot of people, but they just wanted to alienate and control me. Unfortunately, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't talk to them anymore, but I still live in the same city as them, and I have a lot of social anxiety because of that. One of my roommates exhibits the same kind of behavior my parents were so kind as to bestow upon me. It makes things difficult to handle. I just want people to be happy and live in a healthy environment. It's so messed up that the biggest monsters in the world are the people closest to you. I had to be home by the time the streetlight that was at our house turned on. If I didn't make it, I'd get grounded. Turned out, years later, I found out that my parents had control of the one light in our yard with a switch in the utility room. It wasn't solar controlled to turn on when the sun went down like the other street lamps in the neighborhood. I have too many to name growing up in an Asian household, but the one that was the most embarrassing was I was not allowed to shave my legs or armpits, and I hit puberty at an early age. So I had really hairy armpits and legs and was forced to wear shorts to gym class. I was so embarrassed about my legs that I would wear shorts with opaque pantyhose, which just made the whole situation worse, and was the butt of many jokes in middle school. My mom has apologized thousands of times since, but it still brings back crappy memories. I had a ton. I think the most unreasonable was that we, my siblings and I, weren't allowed to know where we were going during car rides. If we'd ask, we were told business and figure out we were going to the store or whatever only after we arrived at our destination. This lasted until I moved out. Another was asking for permission to use the bathroom every time. This didn't last as long. Okay, I think this is the second time this has come up about not being allowed to ask where you're going during a car ride. Guys, can you let us know in the comments? Is this a common thing? I've never heard of this before. A friend of mine wasn't allowed to wear shorts to school unless it was already over 80 degrees when she had to leave. School started at 7:40 a.m., so this almost never happened, even on days where it reached over 90 midday. The school didn't even have air conditioning. My dad was incredibly strict while I was growing up. Two of his stupidest rules were, number one, my brother and I had a bedtime of 9 p.m. until I was a senior in high school. Number two, bedtime was so strict that we weren't allowed to get up to use the bathroom after 9 p.m. And number three, He made us have a babysitter until I was 14 years old. Of course, he denies ever doing any of these things to this day. Another very stupid rule was no locked doors in the house. Ever. As in, locking the bathroom door wasn't allowed, and my dad proclaimed that he should be allowed to come into any room in his house anytime he wanted. He would often try to come into mine and my brother's rooms while we were changing or something, so I got into the habit of changing my clothes very quickly and only when our dad was upstairs or something.
Cops of Reddit. What's the stupidest thing or crime someone did right in front of you? I worked as a small town sheriff's deputy in a rural country. One night, I was running code to a domestic disturbance at a home a couple miles away. I was cresting a hill and noticed a pair of headlights in my lane of travel on a 2-lane road. I pulled up and noticed a beat-up old yellow pickup truck with the driver's side door open facing me and blocking the road. I then noticed a disheveled-looking man standing in the ditch, sheepishly holding an obviously upset raccoon by the tail. I stepped out of the car and yelled to the man politely, inquiring as to what was happening. He shrugged his shoulders and yelled, "Sorry, forensic Sasquatch," before pitching the raccoon into the bushes. I didn't have time to ask questions, but told him to move the car out of the way so I could get to my domestic. Months later, I ran into the gentleman in town, and he introduced himself as the raccoon guy. I asked him what had happened, and he told me, "I was driving along and saw 2 raccoons trying to get into the same culvert, and they got stuck. I told myself, I'll bet I could grab one of them if I tried, and went and grabbed him by the tail. Ooh, boy, was he sure mad." I asked him what he was planning to do with the raccoon, and he just shrugged and gave me a quizzical look. My roommate was a cop. We were walking home after work. I passed right by the station on my way home, and she'd usually join me. She was still in uniform, badge and all. We passed by a liquor store, and a group of kids surrounded us and asked us to buy them liquor. She said, "How old are you?" They said, 16. That's why we can't buy it ourselves. She asked them after she arrested them why they'd approach a uniformed police officer of all people. Their answer, "We didn't think you were a real cop because you're a woman." Wow! So these children must be very educated. Someone please cue the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme song as they're all just being arrested and handcuffed behind them. Bum, bum, bum. You kids are dumb and you're going to jail. You're going to be in juvie with the record. Oh, geez. So many. Probably the guy who asked me how much illegal substances I wanted to buy. I was in full uniform, but he was looking down, counting the rocks in his palm at night. I laughed and said, "I'll take all of it." He said, "That's going to be like $50 then." As he looked up at me, realizing the error in his ways upon seeing me, he ate them all. He got out of going to jail right then, but got a warrant for destroying evidence and arrived to the hospital to have his stomach pumped. So, kind of worth it for him, I guess. We just went through this literally last time. Bum, bum, bum. You're not going to jail, but you're going to go in the hospital having your stomach pumped because you are stupid. Pardon my Joker laugh there. Driving down a 2-way road, 1 lane each way. Car up ahead of me on my lane makes a U-turn from the curb. He was parked. Then proceeds to swerve towards my lane, driving on the wrong side of the road. I slow down. He honks at me as if I'm in his way. He swerves back to his lane and keeps driving. I stop him ultimately after he hit the curb trying to pull over. Yup, guess who got a DUI? Not a cop, but I was behind the Dumbo who did it in front of the cop. Near my mom's house is a bunch of horse property, so it's normal to see guys go by on their horses. I was behind a black SUV and see a police car parked facing the street. The Dumbo in the SUV slowed down just to veer closer and rev his engine at the horses. One was calm, but the other was freaking out. The cop's sirens came on so fast, it surprised me. Guy got his horse under control, and the Dumbo in the SUV got pulled over. I deal with stupid every day at work, but here's one that I always like to tell. Back when I was working gang units, we were in a residential neighborhood in East LA at night. We hear a car do a huge, long burnout. It sounded really close. We turned off our lights and waited for some weapon fire, but never heard any. Just then, a car goes flying by us. We turn on the lights and go after him. He pulls over right away and starts apologizing to us, saying that his foot slipped off the clutch. Yeah, right. A burnout that long and your foot slipped? Turns out, he just broken up with his girlfriend and he went to her house to do the burnout in front of it. Now, the interesting thing about working gangs is we don't do traffic or answer calls unless it is gang-related. We muck with gang members. But we had to stop because of what he did in the neighborhood we were in. Since this guy wasn't a gang member, we were just going to let him go. We hadn't even run his license or even asked for it yet. Now here is where it gets stupid. He looks at us and says, "Can I ask you something before you take me to jail?" My partner and I look at each other, ask him for his ID, and run it. Turns out, he had a $15,000 warrant for his arrest. He was seconds away from going home and ended up in jail that night. Funny thing is, I don't think he ever asked the question. I was military police, and this happened back in 2012. I was doing a routine building check on one of the schools on base. Due to our security posture that day, I was in full battle rattle and had my piece with me at 6'2" and 220 pounds. I am an enormous person with all that body armor and such on. I turn the corner to check the backside of the school and see two teenagers sitting on a picnic table outside one of the doors. Mind you, this is a Saturday, so there's nobody in the building. The kid sees me, a giant wall of weaponry, and immediately throws something under the little PE shed. My first thought was the leaf. We're on a military base, you can't have that crap. So I asked the kid what he just threw, and he immediately starts crying. The girl he was with had such a bewildered look in her face at the sight of him breaking down like that. Admittedly, I was also a bit surprised. The girl was 16 and the guy was 15. She told me that it was just a cigarette, so I made the boy fish it out from under the shed. Sure enough, it was just a Camel Crush cig. Not even broken yet. "Are your parents home?" I asked the boy. He shook his head. You live on base, right? Go smoke these in your dad's garage. It's Saturday anyway. Why are you here in school property? I'm not going to arrest you." Suddenly he stopped crying and started praising me for being the coolest cop ever and thanking me for not bringing him in, as if smoking a cig was a huge deal on a military base full of nuclear weapons. Later that day, coincidentally, also on school building check, I found two 14-year-old boys sitting against the wall eating honeysuckle flower petals. So that was weird. I was out at a client's site to burn some camera footage for the police, and due to the slow DVD burner, I found myself outside having a smoke break with the detective that came to collect it. We were shooting the crap back and forth about the weather when a homeless guy walked up and asked for a light. Duct tape jacket and shoes? Check. Overpowering smell of mold, waste, and burning tires? Check. While I was doing the mental math of, is this guy likely to try a runner with my Zippo in front of a cop? The detective produced a book of matches and told him to keep them. The homeless guy walked 10 feet away to an illegally parked Crown Vic belonging to the cop, sat on the hood, and started emptying his pockets. An illegal substance pipe, 2 Bic lighters, 1 crushed pack of illegal substances, and a handful of plastic baggies. Detective elbowing me and whispering, "He's lucky I have places to be." Finally, the guy found what he was looking for, a pathetic little pinner of an herbal leaf, wedged in the cigarette pack and lit up using one of the lighters. Detective still whispering, "Bet he doesn't even share." I let out a snort, which the homeless guy apparently didn't appreciate. He looked straight at me, then straight at the cop, and the flash would have lost to this 90-pound white dude in duct tape shoes. He was half a block away and around the corner before his rolled-up leaf stopped rolling around on the sidewalk. I was training a rookie. We were the same unit with the same designator, a radio call sign. I called dispatch my police radio. 240 Alpha is what I said, indicating that we, 240 Alpha, were calling dispatch. My rookie was standing directly next to me, like right beside me. He got on the radio and said, 240 Alpha, go ahead. Thinking the dispatcher was calling him. In short, he answered himself on the radio. The dispatcher was confused. I wonder how long they kept him like that after he said what he said. I just want to know if they were just staring at him the whole while. "Oh boy, this isn't good. Dispatcher's gone quiet. What do we do, sir?" I don't know. Why don't you ask him again? And just may I remind you, do you see this piece of paper?
Yeah?
What does it say right there?
240 Alpha. Yeah, I know.
Uh-huh. And do you see the names beneath that?
Well, hey, wait a minute. That's my name. Oh, that's my name.
Yeah, that's your name. My agency is the primary agency responsible for boat patrol in my area. One July weekend, my partner and I are just beginning an afternoon shift on the water when another boater flags us down. We make our way over, expecting them to be having mechanical trouble or something. Nope. 2 guys on board, and the operator tells us he wants us to write him a ticket for his expired registration. Says he was just given a warning last weekend and knew we'd catch him anyway. So, might as well get it over with. Pretty good, right? Not done. Eventually, we put our boat on the lift and get off the water to grab dinner. While eating, we get a call from dispatch that a boater had just called in a complaint about another boat that was operating dangerously and nearly caused an accident. We make our way back there, and sure enough, it's the boat from earlier. Turns out they had asked us to write them a ticket earlier because they thought that would keep us from stopping them later after they had gotten intoxicated. Didn't want that OWI. And still not done. This time, when we stopped them, there was an additional person on board, an intoxicated girl that they allowed to operate their boat. We check her ID, says she's 22, but can't get a return on it. It's fake. She's underage, and they knew it. Now she's going to jail for OWI, among other things, and they're getting charged with furnishing alcohol to a minor. Good thing they got that registration ticket out of the way earlier. I am completely unsurprised. Just about every boater at the marina I live near are alcoholics that do stupid crap just like this. My mother does security at an abandoned waterfront hotel, and every single freaking time she has to tell half those boaters, abandoned private property for your own safety, there's no trespassing. Even though they've been there 15 times before, just because they were too crap-faced last time to remember. And every time they're like, what? Really? No way! Like they can't believe the place is dangerous, even though the place is literally falling in on itself. There was this one guy who would stand on property and talk to her for 5 to 15 minutes, despite being told to leave and getting no reception from her. Then she called 911 after watching him book it from one of the rooms and finding a lab inside. Since she knew him, she was able to point to which boat he lived in, and he was getting arrested. He was like, "But I thought we were cool!" No, not even a little bit. Especially not cover up your illegal substance lab and probably become a felon in the process. Cool. Not a cop, but I saw it happen. I worked at a pretty busy nightclub and I watched a man pick up a woman's purse and walk away with it, out toward the parking lot. I saw him get into the passenger side of a vehicle by himself with the purse. I informed one of the off-duty police officers that we'd hire for security. The officer approached the vehicle and turns his flashlight on to catch the guy in the middle of taking a Snapchat video of himself chugging cheap vodka. Turns out, it was his cousin's purse and he needed the car keys. Stupid thing is it was dollar drink night, so how much was he really even saving? At least he got a good Snapchat out of it. Not a cop, but one day a massive water main burst in town and knocked out a couple streets. They put the cops in the ends to make sure nobody went down them. I was driving on a late afternoon and nobody else was really around, so pretty quiet. A young female cop was standing on the corner when over the road from her, some guy wandering down the street jumps up and starts swinging from the road closure sign and then pulled it down. The look on her face was one of pure, "Are you freaking kidding me right now?" Drove off before anything else happened, but I imagine that went poorly for him. 2 of my cousins are in their last year of cop school, so this summer they visited us from the city, and my dad took them fishing at the local lake. Some tourists in an RV were camped illegally. Doesn't bother us locals since it is out of the way, and hadn't had any luck fishing. They saw the catch my dad was carrying and asked if they could buy it. He said he could give it to them for free since we already had dinner. The tourists then gave my dad at least 5 big cartons of cigarettes as payment. And it is almost 100% smuggler goods from the border. My dad turned around and saw my 2 cousins literally sitting on the ground laughing. My partner was writing a ticket while I was documenting the stop via the patrol car's computer. We were on a city street next to a dramatically curved freeway off-ramp. We hear a tremendously loud screeching of brakes and a crashing sound that went on for a few seconds. We turn around and an SUV is on its roof. A tire is rolling across the intersection. We put it out over the air and run over. I looked inside my flashlight and there were multiple bodies all over the SUV. The fire department arrived and cut them out. They were all badly injured and the driver was gone. Drive safe and pay attention, guys. There's a reason my partner was writing a freaking speeding ticket. Not a cop, but was a teenager who did something stupid. My buddy and I were at a stoplight in Princeton, New Jersey, one summer evening, and a town cop pulls up next to us, and for some unknown reason, I turned to my buddy and said, "Hey Dave, put away that illegal substance pipe." Needless to say, we get immediately pulled over and 3 more cops come rolling up. Not hard. We were also 50 yards from the police station. My buddy's car was registered in PA, so it was extra special for the cops. Neither my buddy nor the cops were terribly happy with me that day. After a thorough search of our persons and the car, where nothing illegal was found, the cop turns to me and says, "In the future, you should make sure your hummingbird rump doesn't get in the way of your crocodile mouth." I still laugh about it to this day. This was sometime around 1992. Opposite side of the story, officer pulled me over for driving through downtown with my brights on at 2 a.m. Intoxicated, I reach out to turn them off. As he told me why he pulled me over, I hit my windshield washers instead and sprayed him. He let me go, but he followed me as I drove around the block to drop off a buddy. Pulled in behind my friend's car so he can go home. He literally falls out of my car, beer in hand, 6-pack in the other. Lights come on, and the cop gets out and approaches us. Turns out my buddy was his training officer. Lets us both go with the promise that we aren't going anywhere until we sober up. I walked across the street to a friend's place. Cop leaves. Buddy takes off. Not really a cop, but maybe the cop who handled me will remember this story. Picked up Call of Duty at a GameStop, which was quite a drive away from me, and I wasn't too familiar with the area. The main street had a ton of traffic, so I decided to use side streets without looking at my GPS and ended up driving into what looked like an abandoned factory. Had no clue where I was, but I drove slowly past the open gate, which appeared unattended at the moment, and attempted to make a U-turn back out. Right as I'm about to exit, the cop holds out his hand and yells, "Hey you! What do you think you're doing?" I had no clue where I was, but I knew I mucked up. I rolled down the window and the officer, in a very distinct Australian accent, says, "So, you enjoy running stop signs?" Had no clue there was a stop sign, but I didn't make a complete stop, so I just felt a huge fine coming my way. Told him I had no clue where I was and that I was really sorry. "I just wanted to play some video games, man." He goes on to tell me that I was in the DWP, Department of Water and Power, and if I drove any further down, the guards were authorized to shoot me and that I could have been terminated since they were on red alert. After he asks me to pull over and check my license plate, make and model, etc., he tells me that they'll send my info to the FBI and look for any infractions or criminal records. None, by the way, but okay. Told him again I was sorry, and dude just kept saying, "Leave, leave, leave." I feel for the man because I'm sure he might have lost his job, but he let me go with a slap on the wrist and my body intact. Got extremely lucky, and now I always use GPS if I'm not at least 75% familiar with the area. Hope he's doing well, I owe him. But I swear something felt off, but in the heat of the moment I was honestly dumbfounded. He seemed more annoyed of me and couldn't wait for me to leave, but I don't really know what was happening on his end. That quote about getting shot at stuck with me as he explicitly told me I'd be terminated. And I don't usually hear cops talk about the FBI investigating, but this is government property, so, I just rolled with it. Also, that Call of Duty died out in a month. It was World War II. Overall, not a worthwhile game. What? That's what you got out of this whole scenario? You were threatened that you were going to get shot by a very angry Australian man who was dressed as a police officer and talking about the FBI and how you could have lost your life. But the last thing that you threw in there is, Well, the worst part is that Call of Duty sucked. I mean, what? I would say I'm just glad that you're alive. As a teenager, my friend and I were jaywalking. We got to the center divider when a cop drove by, then made a U-turn, and we stupidly started running and ran up into a parking structure. We were on the roof when 3 cop cars came up, surrounded us with weapons drawn, telling us to put our hands up. They asked why we ran, and we said we didn't know, which we really didn't. We just ran. They searched us, and I had some candy in my pocket, which they asked what I was holding. It was gummy bears. They let us go with a warning. I thought I was pretty stupid. Man, how terrible would it be if the cops were like, and we're going to take this under suspicious activity. Make sure that these gummies aren't filled with anything illegal. Yeah. All right, be on your way. Guys, look, I just got free candy. Police officers of Reddit, what was your they could have gotten away with it if they had kept their mouth shut moment? I had a car pass me once where a passenger hangs the upper half of his body out of the passenger side window with his middle finger in the air while screaming, "Muck the police!" He had my attention for the seatbelt violation. I got behind the car and ran the registration. Registration is suspended. Registered owner's driver's license is attached to the registration and his license is suspended. Registered owner also has 2 warrants for retail theft. I stopped the car, and they both started with the free speech thing and how I can't stop them for giving me the fingers, which is 100% correct. When I pointed out that I can, however, stop them for the passenger not wearing a seatbelt and for the registration violation, suddenly they both got quiet. Driver got arrested for suspended license and his warrants, and the passenger got himself a citation. The driver's vehicle got impounded. Moral of the story? Tell your passengers to shut their mouths. Had that guy not been a moron, his buddy would have been homeward bound. Not a cop, but a public defender had a client who made a long statement that didn't help her case, but the judge was letting her go without setting bail. Before leaving the courtroom, however, I was informed that the police from another precinct were coming to pick her up, and she'd be held until they did. They didn't get her until much later, but I told her to absolutely not say anything to them, to keep her mouth shut. The next day I go to do her arraignment, and I get the notice of any statements, which started with, "My lawyer told me not to say anything, but this is what happened," and admitted to a variety of crimes. It was frustrating to say the least. Not a police officer, but I do know of this house in my local village that was a notorious den of illegal substances. The police came to search that place but couldn't find anything. And as they were leaving, the lovely owner yelled at them that they should have brought the dogs. So yeah, they came back a few days later with the illegal substance sniffing dogs and found huge amounts of that hidden away. Absolute morons. When I was growing up, a cop approached my mom, who's an attorney, at our house. She closed the door behind her, and I watched the interaction inside with my doggo. Now, my mom was always very honest with me about criminal stuff. She probably wanted to scare me out of committing crimes, something that largely worked. She comes back inside a good 30 minutes later and tells me about the stupidest dealers ever. Guy and girlfriend sell mad amount of illegal substances just down the block from my house. They are the big boy distributors of the area. It's a decent-sized city, but on the smaller side, so I don't know how the heck the illegal substance scene works. And the cops have been hoping to bring these guys down. Well, the cops caught a break when they confessed to a dispatcher. Turns out they were robbed by a rival dealer, and their computer was stolen. This is the early 2000s, so desktops were pretty clunky, along with all of their illegal substance. They called 911 and proceeded to tell them all of these details, somehow never realizing their stupidity. The cops swooped in, the station is literally 2 minutes away, and arrested the lot of them, and then told my mom everything. They were in our neighborhood, and my mom knows and is loved by everyone. Moral of the story? When reporting your house is being robbed, maybe leave out the part where all of your illegal substances was stolen. You know, I'm really curious how that conversation actually went down over the phone. 911, what's your emergency?
Oh, thank God. Everything's been robbed. I'm reporting a robbery.
Okay.
My new Dell computer and all my illegal substances are gone.
Oh, please go on.
The white stuff, the powder, the sugar cherries, all the wings. It's the good stuff.
Yep. We'll come pick you up in a couple minutes.
Honey, I did it. I told them everything. Oh, God, I told them everything.
I was asked to help keep the peace while 2 probation officers searched a guy's house. In most jurisdictions, you have to submit to a search of your person and your home if you're on probation. During the search, a PO lifted the probationer's mattress and said monotonously, "Wow." The probationer got upset and said, "Yeah, it's freaking snowing my piece. Arrest me. I don't give a freak." Turns out the PO found a huge naughty toy, but after the guy opened his mouth, the PO lifted the mattress more and found a bunch of individually wrapped grams of snow and a weapon. The PO said that seeing the naughty toy was enough for him to ignore the mattress, but because the guy said something, he kept looking. That guy's attitude and his need to open his mouth got him 10 years in prison. Not me, but my boyfriend. Boyfriend's working overnight when a guy comes through town doing 35 miles per hour in a 25-mile area. Boyfriend pulls the guy over and asks for his documentation, license, registration, insurance. Guy flips open his glove box, snatches his documents out, and snaps the glove box closed super fast. Boyfriend laughs and says, "What do you have in there?" Guy gets a little sheepish and says, registration, insurance, a little bit of leaf. Boyfriend, "What?" Guy coughs and says, "Registration, insurance, and a little bit of leaf." Boyfriend laughs again and says, seriously? Can I see?" Guy got a slap on the wrist for being honest and having a very small amount. Currently watching live PD, and the guy told the officer,
I have caffeine pills in my back pocket.
Gets them out, puts them on the hood. Everyone's chill. The dude then comes clean and says it's Molly, and the officers look at each other and go, "Do we even have a test kit for that?" Other officer says, "No." Dude's face just shows he should have kept his mouth shut. I saw PD as well, ironically in my hometown, where a woman pulled off the highway unnecessarily with another car that the cop initially intended to pull over. She mentioned to the cop that she wanted to have a few words with the other vehicle because they were being rumpholes and trying to race her. This is why the cop pulled the other car over, because they were speeding. Anyways, officer tells her no and that she needs to leave, and that it would not only be unsafe, but also illegal if she got out of her vehicle like that on the side of the highway. She says, okay, whatever. Cop proceeds to speak with the other vehicle, and she is still parked there, now yelling out her window at the other vehicle. Both the cop and the people are laughing, and he still does nothing. Cop goes to write the speeding ticket, and this witch gets out of her car and approaches the other vehicle. He finally freaking cuffed her and put her in the squad car, all the while she's complaining that it's completely unfair, was completely dumbfounded. Okay, so we had a DUI accident where a guy kept driving straight into the woods into a tree because his GPS was predicting a future street. He walked back to his hotel room and left his check and papers in the car. So we go to the hotel and go to his room and knock on the door. He did not have to answer, but he did. He was pretty clearly intoxicated. I asked him if he had anything to drink since the accident. He did not have to answer, or he could have told us that he drank after the accident. He said, "No, I haven't had anything to drink since the accident." And where I'm from, you have 24 hours to report a property damage only accident, so it wasn't even a hit and run. So, as I'm locking the guy up, he tells me he's a lawyer. I told him, I hope you're not a defense attorney. But in his defense, he was intoxicated. I can respect that. A man who follows his GPS, his Siri, all the way to the end. Turn left. But Siri, that's just the ocean. Are you sure that's the way to Disney World? Yes, turn left. Do it now. Okay, here we go. Yes, another one. When I was in high school, I liked to park in parking spots that cars had parked poorly into just as a muck you. One time, I was at a high school football game and a Jeep had parked like crap. He was nearly halfway into the spot next to him and parked at an angle. I was driving a 98 Chevy Silverado at the time, a big old pickup truck, and I had my brother help guide me into the spot so I was perfectly in the lines. That made it so the driver door was completely impossible to get in. I took a picture for the novelty of it and went on my way. When I got back to my car, the Jeep was gone and every panel on the passenger side of my car was keyed. There was an officer nearby, so I told him about it and showed him the picture. He told me there's not a lot they could do because there were no witnesses, but he'd give it a shot. He looked up their license plate, called them, and asked them if they had done it. They confessed and ended up having to pay $1,600 in restitution along with getting a felony. My friend was pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt while he was with a few buddies, gets handed his ticket, and the guy in the back seat says, "Am I going to get a ticket too?" Officer replies, "Well, were you wearing a seatbelt?" No." "All right. Can I see your ID?" Not really the brightest fella. I don't know why, but I love how, he was excited by this. Hey, oh, come on, man. Can I have a ticket?
Yeah, me too. Come on, I want one. Let's all get one.
Oh, shucks. All right, kids. Everyone gets a ticket today. Hooray! I pull over this guy for expired tabs, ask for his ID, and he's feeling around for his wallet. Can't find it. He says, man, I'm one of you. It's cool." "Oh, what department?" Actually, I'm a security guard, but same thing." I'm polite. "So, where's your ID?" "Oh, it's in the..." And he motions to the trunk. "It's in the trunk?" "Actually, no." My BS radar is going off. "Okay. You want to get your ID out of the trunk?" Nah, I don't have it." He starts looking around for another story to use, but now I know I'm supposed to stay out of the trunk. He's also not giving me any more information. "No ID, then I have to take you in and get you fingerprinted." I'm going to get in that trunk one way or another. He's looking like he's lost. I ask him what's in the trunk, but he's not talking anymore. We pull him out and get him in cuffs. Another officer takes him to get ID through fingerprints. Since his car is expired past 6 months, California laws, we tow the car. In the process of getting ready to tow the car, we need to take a quick inventory. In the trunk was a police uniform with fake patches and a metal badge. No weapon, but a duty belt. He also has stacks of explicit imagery of children. This is a guy who a neighboring city had been looking for months. His MO was to dress as a police officer, talk to kids, and you can figure out the rest. If he just gave me his name, I could have looked up his ID and verified he had one. I'd probably have let him go, but the neighboring city had zero information as to his name. They only had a vague description of the car and the fact he was posing as a police officer. In fact, what he would do is start talking to a kid in the 9 to 12-year-old range, tell him he has to be taken in for questioning, and handcuff the kid and take him to his car. He was a bad dude. So this happened a few years ago. I was patrolling my buddy at night. It was almost the end of our shift. Suddenly, we get an alert that a local nearby gas station had just been robbed, unsuccessfully, and that the suspect was supposed to pass by us in a red car. Indeed, seconds later, we saw a man speeding through the road. Details on the side, we ended up catching him on a dead-end street. When my buddy was handcuffing the suspect, I asked the suspect if he had something to do with the robbery. He repeatedly said,
I've never been there. Ask the ginger lady."
Turns out the cashier that night was an old lady named Marcy, covering up for her ill daughter, who would have never been able to identify him since he was wearing a black mask during the robbery, which we never found. Marcy had ginger hair. Fortunately, the suspect was kind enough to inadvertently confess the crime. How could he know the appearance of the cashier if he had never been at the crime scene? The jury thought the same. Fellow officers stopped a car for a turn violation. Guy's wannabe illegal substance dealer, who we've seen around the bars before. We were talking with him and asked permission to search his car. He agrees. I'm bullcrapping with him about sports and weather, and the officer finds a duffel bag. So I joke and say, "Nothing in there that's dangerous, right? Like bombs or grenades or explosives." He nods and says, "Yeah, a bunch of dynamite." I'm waiting for him to laugh or smile or shrug or do something that screams it's a joke. Nothing. I say, I'm going to open the bag and look, okay? Expecting at any moment he will stop me. He doesn't. It was 8 sticks of dynamite he stole from a construction site. Separate story. If he didn't say anything, I would have ignored the bag thinking it was tools. He was getting supplies from an MC to terminate someone. Needless to say, he went to prison for a few years. Pulled a guy over because his car was looking pretty run down. Wanted to lecture him that he shouldn't be driving around at night with only half his lights working. We got out of our car, and I approached the driver window, and he looks at me and says, "Yeah, all right, I admit it. I smoked some leaf." Alrighty then. Wanted to give him another chance. "What? We know your lights are broken." "No, I smoked the leaf." Cue the eye roll. "Gosh darn it, man." So we parked his car and drove him to have a blood test done. We were already done with our shift for an hour because we waited for a long time for the doc. So when we got out, I was ready to go home. He turns to me and says, "I can't call anyone to pick me up or I'll get in trouble." Good Samaritan kicks in, ends up driving the guy home. He's a chill dude, obviously. I don't know what happened to him afterwards. He probably lost that internship we were talking about. Some idiots from my hometown broke into a few houses in the early 2000s. Among several stolen items was a handheld video camera. They proceeded to record themselves breaking into several more houses and posing back home with their haul. Several of the items, including said camera, ended up at pawn shops. Well, when the battery died, they didn't remove the tape. As is customary, the pawn shop found a compatible charger and watched the recordings. Copies of their fingerprints, IDs, and the video were turned into the police, and these morons went to jail. Almost everything from the videos was recovered from area pawn shops. Not a cop, but I have a buddy that is. Nothing too crazy, but he's had countless moments where he's tried to give people a break, or all they had to do was sit down and be quiet, but they end up talking themselves into jail. Recently had a dude he pulled over that was a bit over the limit for a DUI, but not too much, so he was going to let a friend pick him up instead of arresting him. Guy got to talking and basically revealed driving under the influence was something he did fairly regularly. A single mistake is one thing, but my buddy decided the best chance at getting him to stop would be learning the lesson the hard way. Not a cop. I had a roommate in college that was no friend of mine. He got in a fight at a bar and was kicked out. He tried to go back into the bar and got thrown out again, but a cop happened to be driving by the second time. The cop told him to relax or he was going to be arrested, and he told the cop to arrest him. The cop handcuffs him and puts him in the back of the cop car. Roommate then started banging on the window. Cop then recuffed him with his hands behind his back. Roommate's stupidity carried on for the next couple of months. He was supposed to go to court over the whole thing but didn't show up. Police showed up at his job, cuffed him, and brought him to court. Judge told him he would have just received a slap on the wrist, but he now had to send him to jail for a couple of days. He was scheduled to report to jail a week or two later, and he didn't show up for that either. By this time, he disappeared. I never saw the guy again. Not a cop, but a witness. During college, my friends and I would hang out outside and smoke hookah. Frequently, we would invite strangers who passed by to join, or campus police would casually chat with us as they made their rounds. So, one time, a group of freshmen walked past and asked to join. After about 15 minutes, the campus police car rolls up and the freshmen get visibly nervous. We tell them to calm down. The cops are chill. As soon as the cop gets out of the car, one freshman bolts and he makes it about 20 feet before the cop tackles him. We all clap and heckle the kid. Upon searching him, the cop finds a bunch of leaf. Then he says, "You realize prior to running I had no reason to be suspicious? I just wanted to talk to my friends over there," and points at us. The cop ends up writing a ticket and sends him off. In college, after an early football game, we had a large group at my house. We were planning on partying, but there was a really good game on, so everyone was just sitting around watching the game. We were about 50-50, underage, ages 20 to 22. There were a few people who had beers, but the drinking had not started. People were flowing in steadily, and I guess the neighbors saw the amount of cars and called the cops to file a noise complaint at 7 p.m. There was a knock at the door and someone said, "Come in." In walks a cop. I surveyed the room to realize everyone who had a beer was over 21, except one. Just as the officer was about to speak, she takes off and dives from the couch to behind the kitchen counter. The cop pauses, shakes his head, said there was a noise complaint, but he had been sitting outside for 10 minutes and hasn't heard a word. Said to enjoy the game, looks at the kitchen, shakes his head again, and walks out. Luckily, I lived in the town next door to the college, or it would have been a rough night. This situation came from a friend of mine. So we lived with 3 other guys in a 4-bedroom apartment. One day, when only one roommate was home, the police came knocking. They asked if they could come in and search for suspected illegal substance usage. Here's where I should mention the roommate who was home was kind of an oblivious shut-in who spent most of his day playing World of Warcraft or Magic the Gathering in his room. So of course he says, "Sure, come on in," having no idea what his roommates have been up to. In room 1, they find nothing, as that was the oblivious guy's room. Room 2, they find a personal bag of leaf. Room 3, they find a pipe. Roommate 3 didn't smoke, but he and roommate 2 played video games a lot, so it belonged to roommate 2. In room 4, they find a possession with intent to distribute, giant bag of leaf. Apparently just a crap load. Roommate 2 told me it was the most leaves he'd ever seen in one place, and he was angry because he always bought from someone else. Didn't know his roommate was a dealer. 3 of the 4 get arrested, only one who didn't was the guy who let them in. My friend was roommate 3, charges against him got dropped because roommate 2 fessed up to the pipe being his and got a slap on the wrist. Not sure what happened to roommate 4, they never saw him again. Former Walmart employees of Reddit, what are your horror stories? My mom was a manager at Walmart. She told me about this woman who was trying to steal a prepaid phone. When she got caught by security, she used the knife she was attempting to open the plastic packaging with to cut the security dude after cutting herself. She then went on to scream at him that she has an infectious disease and now he's going to have it for trying to stop her. I used to do field service for Walmarts in the Portland, Oregon area. The East Portland stores were especially fun. The Wood Village, Eastport Plaza, and Happy Valley stores are relatively close together, and we techs refer to them as the Gauntlet. The Eastport Plaza store was especially active, and we nicknamed that one the Thunderdome. Every visit, we would witness an arrest or something more exciting or disgusting. Last Christmas, for instance, while Frank Sinatra's version of Mistletoe and Holly was playing, a dude was totally face-planted by some cops after resisting arrest, in the process damaging the automatic doors and knocking over a display. Another time, a tech witnessed the arrest of the hottest-looking naughty worker ever on 82nd Street, being cuffed and stuffed in the parking lot. One day, I arrived at Thunderdome and noticed that I could not get the customer service desk to check in. Several workers were not allowing people to pass, and there was also a number of orange cones marking the restricted area. A quick whiff indicated what my eyes later confirmed. Crap all over the floor. The men's room is right next to the customer service area. Eventually, they had to break out the Zamboni machine to finish cleaning up. I had about 10 registers to work on there that day. They beat the hell out of their equipment in that store, and after 2 hours, I was ready to take a leak and check out. They still weren't letting anybody into the men's room. God only knows what horrors there must have been. Working there as a cashier since October, Christmas Eve rolls around and thank God I'm not scheduled to work. Cue phone call from the manager asking why I haven't come in yet that day. I'm not on the schedule? Manager. Yes, you are. I'm not coming in. I wasn't on the schedule. Next day I worked was the day after Boxing Day went and looked at the schedule, and lo and behold, someone wrote that I was supposed to work in pencil. I quit shortly thereafter. I had a coworker call me one morning, and when I answered the phone very sleepily, she just started crying and asked, "You didn't know you were scheduled, did you?" I hadn't been scheduled, but my boss changed the schedule after my previous day of work and didn't inform me. I couldn't get to work that morning because of my lack of transportation, and I had to hang up after a painful conversation with my sobbing coworker. I transferred not long after that since my boss let that happen a few more times. I shouldn't have to wake up at 5 in the morning to call my boss and see if I'm scheduled for the day simply because she changed the printed schedule constantly. You see, coworkers couldn't leave until coverage arrived. If you're the only trained cashier and the next person doesn't show up and no one else on the floor is cashier trained, they want you to stay until the late person shows up. But if they had already worked 8 hours and covered for 2 additional hours with their coverage not showing up, she was likely to be overworked and at her wit's end only to call and realize no one was coming and she'd have to do a double shift. I worked at Walmart about 13 years ago at one of the few stores left that closed overnight. It was a regular old Walmart, not at all super. I worked overnight stocking. I liked it. I only dealt with customers for a couple hours before the store closed and then just stocked the shelves. I mainly worked in the automotive department, and the nights would go by really fast. I worked with a bunch of people who were related to each other. There was a dad, Steve, his wife's sister, and a stepdaughter who worked there during the day in the jewelry department. Steve stocked the sporting goods department right next to mine. This guy was really gross. He would constantly pop over to my section and ask me if I needed help lifting stuff up onto the overstocked shelves, and he would make comments about how pretty I was and how if he was 10 years younger, he'd date me. Dude was pushing 50 and I was just a 19-year-old girl. I just laughed off his comments, say I didn't need help, and that I was perfectly happy with my boyfriend, thank you. One night, he decided to tell me how big his one-eyed monster was. He relayed a story, a total lie I'm sure, about how one day he was getting out of the shower and his stepdaughter, who was 17, saw him accidentally and exclaimed about how nice his one-eyed monster was and how she wanted to try it out. I was dumbfounded and I did not know what to say. I just said, "Oh, well, I gotta get back to work," and kind of shuffled away. A week later, he was caught doing the deed with his wife's sister in the bathroom at work. They were both fired, his wife quit, and his stepdaughter continued to work there. Mine isn't as bad as some of those here, but it was its own special kind of awful. I worked on third shift for a summer between college years. The Walmart I was in had about 1 hour's worth of music playing over the speakers all night, playing on a non-stop loop. My sleep habits were already pretty mucked from trying to adjust to third shift, but the music is what really did it. I heard that same music loop over and over again, all shift, 5 days a week. When I left the store, I would still hear it running in my head. Then I started hearing it in my dreams. Then it got so ingrained that I started just dreaming I was working my shift at Walmart. Several days a week, I would have the experience of working an entire 8-hour shift. Then just around quitting time, my alarm clock would go off, and I would wake up and go work an 8-hour shift. I quit a few weeks early at the end of the summer because I was losing my gosh darn mind. I sprained my back moving product in the back. At first I thought it was a pulled muscle, and I walked towards the pharmacy to try and buy a heating pad and some Tylenol. I made it to jewelry, barely keeping conscious from the pain. I asked my coworker to call management and let them know I had hurt myself pretty badly and needed to go to the hospital. Management told her to have me go back to the office to fill out paperwork. I blacked out twice going back and was yelled at for taking so long. I ended up being out for a month and a half for the injury and got a whopping $24 in workman's compensation because the second I got hurt, my hours were reduced to 1 hour a week. I hate Walmart. A friend of mine was working part-time at Walmart. He'd been there for over a year. He was working any and all positions, shifts that they threw at him, so he could try to provide for his wife and unexpected baby. He started to apply for any and all full-time positions as they really needed the benefits. One day, management took him aside and told him this was not the Walmart way, and he needed to make a plan with steps on how to get a particular position. Apparently, anything full-time is not okay. Walmart wants to help you achieve your specific goals, but really Walmart wants to use you as much as they can and break your spirit. Once I had a woman who was giving me a hard time about a coupon that was expired. Coupon people are the worst. She refused to give up. She really wanted that $1 off. My line was getting really long and I was getting really frustrated. So I reached in my pocket and pulled out a $5 and said, "If I give you a $5, will you give up on this coupon?" She got angry and said, "I can't believe you said that to me." She told the CSM, but I didn't get in trouble for it. The amount of times that people ask me why we don't take coupons after they expire is ridiculous. They have a freaking date on them for a reason. I'll start with my grossest. A woman comes in with some underwear and said they didn't fit, and she wanted to return them for cash because she had already bought the correct size elsewhere. She had a receipt and plopped a Walmart bag down on the counter. Inside this bag were 6 crusty, crap-stained underwear that were a biohazard from 6 feet away. Needless to say, I did not touch them. I paged the manager on duty and he tells me to just take them back, despite being very gross. Processed the return and she happily left the store with her $8. Former cart pusher. Had an old lady try to tip me $1 after I helped her bring her newly bought plants or some crap to her car. Told her I couldn't accept it per company policy, and it was only $1, so it wasn't particularly enticing. She then proceeded to roll over in her little scooter mobile and stuff it down the front of my pants. She chuckled dirtily as she rolled away. Yo, Granny is making it rain over here. Look at all those pennies, just tossing pennies at all of those cart pushers.
I love going to Walmart. I get to see all the chunky hunkies. Here, pennies for everyone.
I worked for Mallwart 11 years ago for a whopping total of 8 months. I worked the overnight shift as an overnight stalker for Department 8, Pets. The store I worked at had just gotten brand new high-rise shelves installed. They were said to be able to hold over a ton. Well, one night after getting all my regular freight stocked and overstock put into the bins, my bosses had me pull 8 pallets of Arm & Hammer cat litter. The boxes had a bonus 10 pounds inside, making them nearly 35 or so pounds apiece. They wanted all of those on the high risers. I asked if they were absolutely sure the shelves would be able to handle all that weight. I threw a crap fit about it because I know I was in the right for being worried. Other department managers who were there also sided with me. They watched me over the next couple of hours as I carefully did my job. As I was putting the final 12 boxes on the bottom shelf, I heard a cracking and tearing sound. And the next thing I know is I'm buried underneath all of the cat litter that had caused the shelves to collapse. Everybody in the store heard it happen, and everybody was explicitly told not to dial 911 or anything. Muck that crap! After getting all my blood cleaned from my face and cuts patched up, I called my uncles, then my girlfriend, who was a lawyer, told her what had just occurred and what the upper management is attempting to do. As of today, I still haven't spent all the money I received as a result of going to court over it. Muck Walmart! I was a department manager in frozen foods. One day, on one of my days off, so I didn't witness this, one of my employees came into work seeming very confused and disoriented. She couldn't remember the date, what day it was. Someone asked her what her name is. She couldn't remember. She clearly had what some would call a very minor case of serious brain damage. The store refused to call 911 and instead called for her mother to pick her up and take her to the hospital. Apparently, something that not everyone appears to be aware of is that if you ask someone, "What is your name?" and they respond, "I don't know," then you need to call for an ambulance. This woman had a blood vessel in her brain that popped. Her head partially exploded. It could have terminated her. And those cheap plastards at Walmart wouldn't call 911. There was also someone in produce who had a heart attack. The store didn't call 911 for him either. One of the other produce associates had to volunteer to take him to the hospital. Walmart is the only place I've ever worked at where I could say they wouldn't care if I passed on right there in the store, and it wouldn't be hyperbole. Muck Walmart. Wow, there definitely is a theme here. That's 2 stories now of people nearly just getting terminated in the store. Is there a rule or something that you just can't call 911? That's insane. Why would they do this? What's wrong with you, Walmart? I was working at Walmart at the beginning of this year. Aside from weird older men hitting on me, it wasn't that bad. A few weeks before the minimum pay was raised, they decided I needed a new position in the store. I was told that I was great with people and need to be out helping customers as opposed to checking. Sales associates get paid less than cashiers. They told me that since it was basically a promotion for me, that they would let me keep the cashier pay instead of lowering me to sales pay. I agreed to the job for that reason, plus new job was full-time. A week later, they take me to sign the papers for the job switch, and the manager gets to the pay part. He says, I know we told you that we could keep the same pay, but it's just easier to make it the same as everyone else's. Besides, everyone's pay is going up in a few weeks anyway. So I just agreed, whatever, still going to be making more. Then my hours start getting cut. I agreed to 40 hours. I was cut down to 25. My manager said he messed up the schedule on accident and would fix it. It continued happening every week. I finally got so frustrated I just left one day and never came back. 4 hours into my first shift, I was facing items on a bottom shelf while a coworker was facing items on the top shelf. She dropped a gallon of Gatorade on my head. Management refused to let me report the injury or leave to seek medical attention. I finished the shift, dazed and in pain. The next day, I found out my skull was broken. Officially, since I was not allowed to report the injury, it didn't happen at work. I rage quit. This happened before I got hired, but I heard enough about it from coworkers. An elderly couple would come in once a week to go shopping. The old man had trouble walking, so he would kiss his wife and go sit in the fitting room area until she was done. One day, they came in and did the little kiss, and he also handed her his wedding ring, like he knew something was about to happen. A couple minutes of sitting there after his wife walked off, the guy collapsed to the floor, and the fitting room ladies called 911. One of the department managers of the time was also a paramedic, so he rushed over. The old guy started to cough up blood, and every available associate had to come and make a wall of people so customers don't see what is going on. All these associates saw and heard the guy choking on his own blood, now coming out of his nose and ears, passing on the floor. They were trying to find his wife, and no one could find her, and the associates had to wait a half an hour for the coroner to get down there and take the body. The associates who saw it still have flashbacks about it. One day, a woman stole a bottle of perfume and took it to the bathroom. She poured it out into her own container and then proceeded to fill the container with her own urine. She then took the bottle up to the returns and tried to return it. To this day, I have no idea why my manager gave her the refund. It was very obvious that the woman urinated in the bottle because it was still warm. A woman steals perfume, returns her own urine, and profits from Walmart. You know, it takes a type of crazy to actually be prepared to do stuff like that. Is that in her agenda? Is that in her calendar? Yes, today is going to be a wonderful day as I'm just going to steal some delectable perfume from Walmart and then just return it for an extra few bucks with my equally as valuable urine. That's a whole nother level of crazy. I warn you, and I warn myself, we are never going to go to Walmart late at night. Just no. Someone left a baby in a stroller just chilling in one of the aisles one night. I was a cashier at the time, so I don't know all of the details, but from what I know, authorities got involved and the guy came back after what we think was at least an hour or two, appearing oblivious to what he did wrong. I don't think he spoke much English, so it was just a confusing situation all around. Thank God for the guy stalking who was looking out. We're lucky it didn't get any worse knowing how crazy people who come through can be, let alone at night. What's weird was this wasn't even brought up again with my coworkers, so I don't recall what ended up happening to the guy. It was just another stupid thing we witnessed. The whole don't call 911 thing was standard also at Target. I worked in the deli and our gloves to clean the slicer went missing one day. They are reinforced to help in case your finger makes contact with the blade, so the blade won't slice through your finger. Well, I told my manager we needed gloves and kept reminding her every day I worked, but she would just reply with, "I've let the e-tail know." One day I'm cleaning the slicer, it's taken apart so it can't open any wider than the locked and closed position. But there's an open spot at the top where the sharpener goes. Anyway, I'm cleaning it and my finger catches the blade right on the tip and it gets cut off. I felt a sting, thought it was minor and went to the sink. I take off my latex gloves and start rinsing and I see my fingertip is gone, just flat and pouring blood. So I wrapped it in my pure white deli coat and walk out to the deli in the front. I showed the leader on deck for the night and she freaks out, pulls me into the break room and then has somebody take me to the hospital. Some people suggested she call an ambulance after about 20 minutes of me standing at the sink bleeding. Then she pulled in a guy who was shopping that was a part-time firefighter and he took one look and said, "I should have been at the hospital 30 minutes ago." Crazy. This guy comes in on a busy day and I start ringing him up for all kinds of stuff from around the store, including the newly released PS2 and GameCube. Yeah, I worked there a lifetime ago. He writes a check and I proceed to process it in our little machine. It comes back with a suspicious error, so I tell him the machine is acting weird and outside of earshot, I call a manager over. He starts getting visibly nervous as a few CSMs, cashier managers, come over and inspect the check. They ask him a few questions and take the check and disappear, stating they need to run it on a different register and that there's nothing to worry about and they'll be right back. After a few minutes, he is sweating bullets and eventually starts slowly making his way out of electronics. His pace quickens until he's full on running for the door. I watch him from the register cause frick it, I'm not breaking a sweat for minimum wage, and bam! Our huge security guy tackles him to the ground, picks him up, and escorts him up front. At this point, I tell a coworker to take over the register, and I head up front to see what else happens. I just had a feeling. I get there to see the guy meet up with the CSMs that took the check, a handful of managers, and a few police. They present the check to him, ask where he got it, and before anyone can react, he lunges forward, grabs the check, and eats it. Dude ate the check. They wrestle with the guy a little and bring him into the back room. Customers and staff alike were staring in disbelief at what had just occurred. I found out later that the guy was traveling from Walmart to Walmart across state borders, passing bogus checks. So, yeah, normal stuff.
Truck drivers, while traveling through the night, what is the creepiest thing you've ever seen? My father was a truck driver in an area of the country known for toxic waste and Superfund sites. He would tell me tales of an oily purple mist or vapor similar to the heat off a road on a hot day, rising off the swamps around the trucking companies at night. A lot of the truckers he worked with would get sick and start vomiting from the vapor. This was back in the 80s and early 90s, before environmentalism really began to make its impact in our area. My dad has been a lifetime truck driver, first a mover, then refrigerated trailers, then freights, where he is now. He has previously stated that he has seen some crazy stuff. Fights, overdoses, etc. So last summer he was driving, somewhere in Virginia. Note that he complained to me and my mom the week before how people in Virginia drive like buttholes. So anyway, he's going down the interstate and sees the flashing lights of a wrecker and a state cop pulled over to assist a broken down truck on the opposite side of the highway. My dad has always been a curious guy, so naturally he slows down 10 miles per hour or so to take a good look at the guy on the other side of the highway and what's going on. Well, then this happens. My dad has always told me if there is a car or any sort of vehicle broken down on the side side of the road, get to the farthest lane from them, naturally to give them space to move around their vehicle if they need to inspect it for damage and whatnot. Well, people in Virginia drive like buttholes, so they didn't. Even with a flashing light, the original truck driver who is broken down opens his cab door and begins to climb out of his truck. My dad said he did a little hop off the lowest stair from his truck to the highway. In that instant, this car smashes into the guy, killing him immediately. My dad had to stop and regain his composure because he felt like he would pass out. Now that's across the median and on the other side of the road, so I can only imagine how the wrecker and cop reacted. My dad never likes to talk about it. It brings him to tears thinking about it. He sent a card to the family and offered his condolences, but still to this day, it messes him up more than anything he can recall. The first time I took Highway 90 after a pickup in Del Rio, Texas, heading to another pickup in El Paso the next morning. That is a dark and lonely stretch of road. Was told to look for Martha's lights, but didn't see any and kept trucking. What I did see west of there were these bright lights out in the middle of nowhere. It's pretty sparse out there, so I thought I was coming into a town or something. Nope. As I get closer, I see it's some kind of compound, very well lit with security fences all around and a stubby-looking blimp sitting in there. What the hell? With that much light and fencing, this has to be government. X-Files or some crap going on, I thought. Freaky. Mashed my motor and got the hell out of there. Called a friend of mine the next day that I know has rolled through there before and asked him what he knew about it. Find out it's a border patrol facility, looking for illegals. I guess the unnamed blimp goes up attached to a tether to look for heat signatures or something. My overactive imagination was just going into overdrive, I guess. Stopped listening to Art Bell after that. Tells you how long ago this was. I don't even know what Art Bell is. Was hauling a load from California to Michigan once, and my GPS said the trip would be 2 hours quicker if I took US 50 instead of I-80. I soon learned this was the loneliest road in America. No services or anything at all for hundreds of miles. At 0200 in the morning, I was too tired to keep driving and had to stop on a large shoulder for the night. I was still 200 miles from any services and was thoroughly nervous that night because I've heard stories of truckers getting killed while parked in an isolated area overnight. It was also pitch black and I could hear coyotes while taking a whiz. Luckily, I was undisturbed and continued my trip in the morning. Something else is singing trailers. When I was new to trucking, there was a quiet night while I was in my truck bed and I kept hearing an unusual and consistent creaking sound. Upon inspection, it was the trailer airlines making dull noises. Still can't figure out why they do this and when they do it. Lasts for hours. Another thing, I was driving on the I-10 at night and was around Arizona and California. There was a sandstorm at the time, and at the time, the roads would just disappear for like a mile because it was covered in sand. I was lucky because there were a bunch of guys with ATVs driving around and along the road, so I didn't lose my way. Believe it or not, I actually picked this topic because I liked ice road truckers as a kid. Guy I drove with told me a story about killing a hitchhiker. They were in the desert. It was twilight and the guy was wearing tan clothes. He had a girl with him that he said he'd never forget her screaming after he clipped the guy and sent him flying. He knew the guy was dead because he wasn't bleeding, something I didn't understand at first, but made sense after he told me. When you're dead, your heart stops pumping, so no gushing blood like you might expect. He was a Vietnam War vet, so I figured he has other experiences with this. He even kept driving that night after giving the police report and all the other fallout. He just loved driving that much. I drove third shift long haul for years. Start at 6:00 p.m., run till 8 a.m. Never saw anything close to being called paranormal, but the wrecks I saw daily. Being low light, I'm sure some looked worse when passing. But it's sobering to pass wrecks with multiple ambulances, covered bodies, burnt out cars, multiple fire and police units. Past many a crash in the day. Always seems more dramatic at night. I mean, appropriate lighting kind of does that to any scene regardless of the context. That's literally the entire art of filmmaking, kind of. And naturally, flashing bright lights in the dark scene of a crash or some kind of tragic incident really does bring home how serious it is. Not me, but my brother saw a pale-skinned little girl with matted blonde hair walking down the side of a desolate Texas road, swinging her arms around like Vince McMahon, except leaning forward slightly and walking furiously. Oh, I forgot, she was also wearing a dingy old nightgown. Being the guy he is, he started to pull over to offer her help or a ride, but she turned her head, and it wasn't even a little girl at all, but actually a little person, and stared at him, mouth half open, never slowing her pace or turning away until he floored it and never looked back. He called me right after it happened and was clearly shaken. I don't believe in supernatural anything really, and neither has he ever, but something about this girl shook his conviction. I like to think she was sleepwalking and was tired, but it's pretty tough to write off the opinion of a solid guy I've known my whole life. I was moving heavy equipment from job site to job site, and a lot of the time it was me dropping off a dozer, excavator, etc. Late at night. Pulled up to a side, and as my headlight came across the lot, I was leaving the equipment, and I saw a man with a clown mask and camo clothing on top of the long dumpster, digging through it. I stopped and backed up to put the light back on him as he jumped down the backside of the long dumpster. Talk about looking over my shoulder every 5 seconds while I unchained and got the excavator off the trailer, and I was out. Never did see or hear anything, just assumed some creepy clown was watching me from the woods. I get it. That would be terrifying to see a man in camouflage and a clown mask lurking in the darkness. I'd probably be thinking, goddamn, time to get the heck out of here. This sounds like a goddamn Scooby-Doo plotline. I can picture it already. The mystery of the camo clown. It's the business owner. The economy's bad. Biden's America. You meddling kids. Bin Man here. I started around 4:30 a.m., was in a pretty remote area, one house every half mile or so, and I saw this dude standing in boxer shorts and boots on, nothing else, holding what looked like a head of a doll. It looked too small to be human. It was creepy as heck. Thankfully, the bin I had to empty was another half mile down the road. Sounds like the opening of some kind of new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. It didn't happen to me directly, but my uncle was literally abducted while working as a trucker. I'll try to remember the details as best I can. He only told me the story once, then refused to speak about it again. He worked as a trucker his entire adult life, or at least for as long as I was alive. One day, he was up and around Illinois or Indiana area, I think, and it was early evening. He pulled over at a truck stop for a break. He fueled up the truck, then went inside and had dinner. It was one of those with a diner-type place inside. Then took a shower. Point being that he was in there for a little while, 30 to 45 minutes. When he came out to get back in the truck, everything looked normal. But as soon as he opened the door, a guy jumped out from behind the cabin. I think he was hiding between the cabin and the trailer, and pulled a weapon. I think he said it was a gun, but it might have been a knife. Guy orders my uncle to get in the cabin and climb in the back. My uncle drove one of those trucks with the sleeper bed area, the ones you have in the back. Then the guy climbed in after. He told my uncle to lay down on the bed and put his hands behind his back. Then he took some bungee cables my uncle kept in the cabin and tied him up hands and feet. Didn't gag him, as far as I can remember. Then the guy gets in the driver's seat and just starts driving. Uncle said he had no trouble getting the truck going, so he clearly had some experience driving big rigs. From what I remember, he didn't talk to my uncle the whole time. He just drove and would occasionally look back and flash the weapon to remind my uncle that he could mess him up if he wanted. My uncle said he couldn't really see where they were, but he could tell they were on the interstate again. After a long time of driving throughout the night, my uncle mentioned it was probably when the fuel tank was getting low, he pulled over at another truck stop. The guy just looked back at my uncle, seemed to think about something, maybe whether or not to untie him, then just got out, shut the door, and left. My uncle said he laid there for a while, scared he was getting fuel or food or something, then coming back, but he never did. After several more hours, another truck pulled into the spot next to him, and my uncle yelled for help until the guy opened the door and found him. Pretty sure they called the police. My uncle never directly said, but I can't fathom that they wouldn't. But they never found the guy as far as my uncle knew. Turns out that he drove him to the next state over and stopped when he was at 10% of a tank left, and it looks like he left on foot. Sounds like it was fortunate that no one else was fueling at the time, or he might have taken their truck too. After that, I want to say my uncle got like a month off from work to go home and spend time with his family. He actually went back to work as a trucker for a few years more. anymore, but he would never do long-haul trips anymore, and he pretty much retired the second he had enough years in. It was scary listening to that story, not only because it's messed up circumstances, but also because my uncle was a pretty tough dude, and you could just see in his eyes that this thing still haunted him. He did seem extremely grateful, though, that the guy didn't actually hurt him. My cousin was 1 year old at the time and was my uncle's only kid. I guess the moral of the story is, be freaking careful, everyone. There's some messed up people in this world. They are right, the world is not just sunshine, rainbows, and lollipops. There are lots of people who will want to hurt you for any reason all over the place. So my stepfather was a truck driver for 30 years. He stopped driving after a particularly windy night. A guy on a motorcycle was riding too close to the side of his trailer, and I guess the wind blew and he got pulled off his bike under the wheels, and he always told me not to ride my bike next to a truck, because they create whirlwind, and without those side barriers you could get pulled under. He said he saw the bike swerve off into the median, and that's how he knew. He hit the bottle pretty hard after that, and never was quite the same. I have had to reread this several times over because they have refused to use any semblance of punctuation whatsoever in this entire bit of writing, and it is maddening. I'm not exactly what you'd call a truck driver, but my uncle used to have a small fleet, and sometimes he'd pay me to recover a truck when a driver got fired or quit in the middle of a hole. By far the creepiest thing that ever happened to me was when I recovered a truck outside of Detroit. The driver tried to buy crank from an undercover cop and was fired, and my uncle flew me up there to deliver the load and deadhead back to Chicago. Anyway, it's pretty late when I get in, and even later when I get to the truck stop the rig is parked at. So after I called my uncle to let him know I was on site and the cargo was secure, and made sure everything was in working order, I figured I'd catch some sleep and head out first thing in the morning. As soon as I get settled into the rack, I hear this tap, tap, tap on the drive side window. So I unbutt the bunk and slide into the seat, where I found myself face to face with this beat up looking black lady. She goes, "You looking for some company?" Now, I've never had the dubious pleasure of spending some quality time with a lizard before, and I wasn't about to start, but I had dealt with them before, and frequently a no thanks doesn't get the point across. So I'm all, "No, get your butt off my truck and leave me alone." She looks me dead in the eye and says, "Honey, I ain't on your truck," and turned to walk away. Sure enough, she hadn't been standing on my truck. She was just like 7 feet tall and wearing platforms. Well, at that point, what are the platforms even for? A few years back, I pulled into an empty rest area up near Cadillac in Michigan, around 3 a.m. It was the middle of February, and there was a few inches of snow on the ground, and I had to trudge a quarter of a mile from the truck lot to a pavilion, which is no fun. On the way back to the truck, I looked to my right and realized I'm not alone. In fact, I'm equidistant from my truck and a bobcat the size of a large dog that's watching me intently. I instantly freeze in my tracks, and it takes a few steps towards me before stopping as well. Now, I have no idea what to do about a bobcat, but I figure he can definitely beat me to the truck, especially given the terrain. I don't even know if they're dangerous to humans, but I've played some Red Dead Redemption in my time, and I'm not happy about the situation. I turn full face to it and start backing toward the truck, all the while waving my arms and bellowing at it, trying to drive it away. It's not very promising because it keeps taking a few steps towards me and stopping. About this time, a pair of headlights flash over the lot and a minivan pulls into the lot, completely oblivious to the National Geographic event taking place. I start yelling as loud as I can. I manage to alert the guy driving it that there's a crazy person wandering around. He starts his vehicle up again, preparing for flight, and as he backs out, his lights hit the bobcat and it takes off into the trees again. I make a run for the truck. The van drives off into the night, and thus ended probably the 4th most dangerous encounter I've had in Michigan. Why even lie about there being a crazy person wandering around? I'd be like, "Hey, honk at this goddamn bobcat, run it over if you have to, it's intimidating me." Driving between Illinois and Wisconsin last year around 2 a.m., suddenly my headlights illuminate the highway ahead of me, and the road is covered with many large splotches of freshly deposited blood and unrecognizable tatters of flesh. This was like something out of Clive Barker's Nightmares. I can only guess that a semi must have smashed into a deer at highway speeds and just obliterated the poor beast. Yeah, I'm a paramedic and drive through the night. One time I was going through an alleyway at like 4 a.m. looking for someone who overdosed and found two people shooting up on a mattress surrounded by human feces, and the ground was moving because it was all rats scattering at the side of the ambulance lights. This one isn't about truckers, but I just wanted to let you all know that this is the endpoint for people that do hardcore drugs on the regular and don't know how to control themselves. Don't do drugs, kids. Went with my grandpa from Fresno, California to someplace in Death Valley. We were in the middle of nowhere between towns in the California deserts. I wasn't paying much attention to the road at the moment, and suddenly the whole rig swerved hard. I figured it was an animal of some sort, but no. The sewed mirrors showed a woman wearing some sort of long flowing dress. We were both confused as there were no cars parked anywhere. How she got there and what happened to her, we'll never know. Yes, we did report it to the police. Oh, lady of the desert with your long black flowing skirt, I don't know where you're going, why you're here, or what is worse. My grandfather was a truck driver at a lumber yard for about 25 years after World War II. He once told a story about how he and a co-worker both left at the same time from the yard. My grandfather would often go first, and the others would follow, but the other guy insisted on taking the lead. So they're driving on the highway, full speed, and his co-worker gets cut off by a car that just switched lanes without looking. He slams on the brakes. My grandfather noted this and, being so close behind, tapped the brakes and was able to do an emergency slide into the left lane without slamming into anyone. The car was rear-ended by the truck. My grandfather pulled over and came running back, only to find that the contents of the load, tons of lumber, shifted forward during the hard brake and destroyed the cab, decapitating his friend in the process. While my grandfather was no stranger to such sights in the war, especially as someone who fought on islands in the Pacific, he said this was especially tough on him, since when you're in war, you prepare yourself for this kind of thing. You don't expect something so gruesome in civilian life. Trucker here. Creepiest thing would have to be wind, to be honest. Driving down the road and you can't hear it, and I couldn't feel it in my truck. However, the truck in front of me seemed to lift up and just flip on its side. It seemed like it was out of nowhere. I guess it isn't that creepy, but when you're following and the truck in front of you seems to float up and onto its side, it is a little concerning. The most scared I have ever been was going over Donner Pass one night in late April. I had checked the weather reports, and the only concern was supposed to be light snow flurries at the highest elevations. CA will issue mandatory restrictions indicating that you have to put chains on your tires. So I checked the CA.website and no restrictions were called for. I went through the inspection station at Truckee and they were asking if we had chains on the truck, but still no call to put them on. About 10 miles up the road, the sky opened up into the worst whiteout blizzard I have ever been in. I could barely see 50 feet in front of me, and there had been other trucks ahead of me, but I lost sight of his light completely. I could see his tracks in the snow. I slowed down to about 20 miles per hour. Then, just to make it worse, the wind was blowing and the snow was swirling in all directions, and I began to experience a strange vertigo, like I was flying and tumbling in the air. I had to glue my line of sight on those tracks in front of me and hope that guy did not drive off the road. I made it. Only lasted about 30 miles and it turned into heavy rain. I told my dispatcher if I ever had to go through there again at night and any snow was forecast, I was going to shut down until daylight. See, this was the sort of thing I wanted to watch Ice Road Truckers for, but obviously when you get down to it and in the shoes of the person driving, it's like, hell no, I don't want to be in this situation. I never want to be in that situation again. Just a casual trucker here. Can't say I've seen anything that I would consider paranormal, creepy. Although when I started, I always thought I would get fortunate enough that some girls would flash me or something. That's never happened. But I have seen like 4 dudes jerking off. Sometimes, my friend, that is simply the way that life goes. We can't expect everything that we want to happen in life, even if it's as mundane and simple as a girl flashing you while you're on the road. And I'm sorry for that. Doctors, what do patients do that annoy you? I don't like when a patient gets a full workup and their lab work and imaging is completely normal and the patient gets enraged. They don't know what's wrong with me. I'm going to XYZ hospital instead. When they literally can't understand how they are harming themselves. For example, my mom once said that a woman who smoked while pregnant couldn't accept that she was harming the baby. The conversation went something like this. The baby is underdeveloped for its age due to you smoking. So she's sick? In a way, yes. So when will I get some antibiotics for my baby? It doesn't work that way, ma'am. You're making her sick by smoking. But aside from that, she's fine, right? And so on and so on. When a patient is admitted and on their second day, they say, "Hey doc, I feel better now. Can I go home?" Yeah, no, you go home when I say you go home, because feeling better does not mean you are 100% well. Technically, patients can leave whenever they want, but if you want to be discharged with the minimum risk of ending right back in the ER, please listen to your doctor. We don't want you to stay any longer than what's needed, trust us. So even if you say, "Can I go home?" in a joking manner, the fake laugh and strange smile of the doctor in response is proof enough that we've heard that so many times before, and we'd like you to stop. As an American, complain about pain. In the gosh darn awesome US of A, we fix things. Everything. It's this ethos that also permeates into how Americans deal with issues of their health. It is completely unacceptable to be in pain at any point in time. Placing IVs to deliver medication has to get local anesthetic. Simple wrist fracture gets diluted IV, one of the most potent IV pain meds available, in addition to local anesthetic and an oral pain medication. Immediately post-op from lumbar spinal fusion, why does my back hurt? After being in a car accident while driving drunk and only sustaining a tibial fracture and just had it fixed? Doc, I'm just in too much pain to leave. Sitting comfortably in bed eating delivery surrounded by friends reeking of weed. You know, I get it might be annoying, but sometimes when people are just openly complaining about things, it is kind of therapeutic. It makes them feel better. Not a doctor, but an ER scribe. Patients that mumble and patients that can't give a coherent history. Also, when a patient rates their pain as a 10 out of 10 in tri-age, but they're chilling and playing games on their phone when we go to see them. On one hand, there's probably not much else to do when you're in the ER. On the other hand, I do hate it as well when people are just obsessed with their phones. I would probably rather it if they were playing on a Nintendo Switch or something. Like, the thing I hate about it most is when someone is just scrolling through Instagram or Facebook or what have you for like, I don't know, an hour while having a conversation with them, and then they're like, "Oh, you get on my case for it, but you do it too." It's like, no, I'm actually communicating with someone on the other side of this thing. My friend's dad is a doctor who works in the ER. He complains daily about how he wishes he wouldn't save most of these drunk, overweight morons who don't contribute anything to society, and complains about how he feels bad for doing his job, which is actively working against Mother Nature's careful elimination of the unfit. I think maybe it would be in your friend's father's best interest if he got a different job. I've worked in an ER for the last 4 years. I work very closely with many doctors. When I come into the ER, anything that isn't life-threatening because your doctor can't see you, you're a moron and waited till the last minute. You have crap insurance that no one but an ER will take, but you don't have primary care doctor, etc., etc., etc. Are we going to see you? Yes. Are we going to be polite and professional? Yes. Does the hospital business model exist assuming that there will be so many thousands of clinic-type patients in the ER? Yes. But goddammit, are we going to be annoyed that you are taking precious time away from sick patients, delaying triage and rooming time for sick patients, or just annoyed at you in general? Yes. Good rule of thumb. If your problem can wait till tomorrow, it does not belong in an ER. I've actually witnessed that. I think it was this like Muslim lady or something, like a hijab and stuff, and she came into like the A&E and she seemed fine, and she just kind of came up to the desk when there's people like bleeding with like really bad stuff going on with them and goes, "My finger hurt." And I kid you not, this little girl like a twisted up arm who was crying a moment ago like stopped and like looked at this woman like, "You don't belong here, honey." Not a doctor, but my brother is. He tells me he gets very annoyed by most of his diabetes patients. Many of them never take care of their health. They drink soda and eat BS all the time, and they do not exercise. Of course, they get really surprised when they see their sugar test results. "I'm sorry, doctor, but I love chocolate so much." My mother is a nurse, so she has a full list. First off, she hates people who sue. She hates them because 90% of the time, the doctor is doing their best, and it would be ridiculous to sue. But then they turn around and straight up sue the doctors. This causes the doctors to have to run a bunch of unnecessary tests, which not only waste yours and the doctor's time, but it ramps up your hospital bill. This in turn causes the lower class stress, because then they can't afford going to the hospital. If everyone just agreed to not sue, then the hospital bills would be much more affordable, which would make everybody, except the buttholes who sue, happier. Her second hated thing is the mean homeless drunks who come in because they have nowhere else to go, and then they are spitting and trying to fight the nurses because they are so messed up on God knows what. I'm just going to say I have no idea how accurate any of this is. In America, is it like a common thing for people to threaten to sue their doctors? I'm an oral and maxillofacial surgeon. Patients who start crying make me feel as if they're my victims, even though I'm on their side. From my father, ER repeat visitors with new objects stuck in their butt, and from my sister, an NICU nurse, parents that don't come in for newborn bonding time. ER nurse here. I hate when patients tell me the diagnosis that they think they have instead of their symptoms. Might as well Google the meds for it and go straight to asking the pharmacist for them and bypass emergency, dude. In so much pain, constantly asking for more painkillers. On physical examination, shouts out when touched and unable to do much movement. Miraculously manages to heal completely to get up and go out for a cigarette break on the hour every hour. Let's be honest, people that smoke cigarettes can be the most annoying people in just about every setting, especially work. I used to do laboring, and I remember we got this one really freaking fat guy come in one time for the job. Only stayed a day. I'm having trouble carrying a load and I ask him for some help and he just goes to me, "Oh, I'm going for my cigarette break." I was like, "You had one like 20 minutes ago." It's like, "Yeah, I'm going for another." "Well, can you help me with this while we're going down together?" And he's like, "No, I'm on my break." I hate working with people who smoke. Comes in for a cold. "I know my body. Antibiotics are the only thing that helps. I need an antibiotic and I'm not leaving until I get one." Okay, I admittedly did this once with my dentist because they were like, "I'm going to pull your wisdom teeth out because they're giving you abscesses." And I said, "Well, you're going to keep on giving me antibiotics because I'm not going to let you pull my wisdom teeth out." And I feel like I was kind of right to do that in all honesty because like they haven't given me an abscess ever since. Not going to dialysis because you don't feel well. Usually the cause of not feeling well is because you skipped your last dialysis appointment, Karen. There was no mention of a Karen, I just thought it sounded funnier that way. This happens all the time. Do you have any pre-existing conditions? No, I'm very, very healthy. Do you take any medication? Oh, yes, I take this for my blood pressure, this for my blood sugar, this for my MI heart, this for my thyroid, etc., etc., etc. If you want a professional to listen to all of your personal problems, go to an office with a psychotherapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, LCSW, or counselor on their sign and nothing else. Your podiatrist, dentist, or optometrist knows next to nothing about mental health and certainly isn't qualified to treat it. Neither is an otolaryngologist, a gynecologist, or a thoracic surgeon. Honestly, family physicians who have only the slightest training in mental health yet do the majority of prescribing of psychotropic medication in the US really are only a stopgap solution and in best practice wouldn't be allowed to prescribe those meds at all. Ditto times 2 for psychiatric nurses and PAs. Could you tell that some of those words were making me slip up? Not a doctor, but a pharmacist, and I get this a lot. A patient comes in. "I have a 2-year-old with a runny nose, and I found this homeopathic remedy that doesn't actually have any medicine in it. Is this a good choice?" Well, there's no evidence to suggest that this product is effective, but this Claritin or Zyrtec is not only cheaper, it has real medicine in it that has been clinically proven to help manage allergy-type symptoms, including runny noses, and is labeled to be appropriate for children this young. No thanks, I'll just give him this other crap instead after wasting 10 minutes of your valuable time against your professional advice. As a psychologist, DNAs did not attend. I find it really difficult to do other work while waiting to see if my patient has come. All the prep and supervision time also feels wasteful, although they are part of the work because avoidance is hugely common in everything. My mother has worked as a biller for a doctor's office, gastroenterologist, for years. Some of the ones she comes home complaining about include, but not limited to, people telling her about their symptoms. She's not a doctor, please save this for him. Calling to complain about how much an office visit costs. Yes, even if it is $20, she does not control this. There is not anything she can do about it. Bringing in stool samples to show her, yes, it really happens. That poor, poor woman. As a doctor, I really have to add in that a lot of these comments bother me. The last thing the big portion of these patients need is another reason to be scared of going to the doctor, or personal judgment from the doctor. If the patient came in with what you consider a low-level reason, take the time to educate. That is at least half the reason any patient is there, and they can appreciate it. Ask yourselves if you enjoy going for medical and dental visits yourself. I don't. It can be a vaguely embarrassing, invasive, humbling experience, though I do appreciate the value of being educated again of what it's like to be a patient. While I don't see it often, there is one thing that annoys me about patients, though. I wouldn't express it to them. Anyone who defends cigarette use as something more natural and relatively innocuous. I had the aunt of a pregnant teenage patient rhetorically ask me if quitting smoking would cause a shock for the baby and therefore be harmful for the pregnancy. It was clear from the tone that she thought the girl should continue to smoke. Another wanted only natural medications and vitamins during the pregnancy. No vaccines, fully natural childbirth with no cord cutting, all of which I am fine with for the record, but continued to smoke half PPD during the pregnancy. To all smoking, pregnant, and preconceptual patients, I say, for the grand majority of pregnancies, up to the point the child is born, you quitting smoking is more important than anything I can do as a doctor, and I will gladly help you in any way I can towards that goal. I think maybe many people needed to hear that right there, because at the end of the day, these people aren't here to judge you. Granted, they probably will, because that is definitely going to happen in all of these situations, but at the end of the day, they're really here to help us. Sorry, I'm not a doctor. I'm only a lowly optician, but we have patients too, and they make me so angry. So, when I spend time fixing their rimless glasses, I hand them back and they start bending them to check and see if they still wiggle, which makes them wiggle again. When they put on a brand new pair of glasses and they start moving them all around, up and down, right to side, and claim their vision seems weird. Well, yes, you aren't allowing your eyes to relax through the focal point. Put it on your face and focus on one thing at a time until your eyes submit to the refraction. People who have been in progressive lenses for years but buy a new pair and suddenly don't know how to use the lenses properly. I give them a reading card and they try to look through the top of their lens to see up close and then claim they can't see. Well, yeah, that part of the lens is only for seeing far away. Look down, please. Not patients, but doctors. Doctors who are too arrogant and egotistical to acknowledge that the RX they wrote doesn't work for the patient. I don't even blame the doctor for the RX being wrong. It could be wrong from the patient's blood pressure, eye pressure, cataracts they refuse to get removed, allergies, dry eye issues. Maybe the patient is just stupid and can't answer questions correctly, but the doctor should always allow the patient to come back and get retested if need be. Also, don't blame my glasses. I check my end to make sure we didn't mess up before we send them back over. It's usually doctors who have an optical in their office who have this issue. We're their competition. Maybe they're just stupid. That is surprisingly the answer for a lot of things. I know sometimes I'm just stupid. As an emergency medicine doctor, leaving against medical advice when they have something serious, I had a patient with a very large pneumothorax, collapsed lung. He insisted that he knew his body and had to leave so he could sell his car. Another patient had a STEMI, the more serious type of heart attacks, and left against medical advice from the ambulance. Even had the cardiologist talk to him on the phone, essentially saying, if you don't come to the hospital, you'll most certainly die, and still insists on not coming in. Smack overdose patients that act like jerks happen so often. Patients will be passed out, not breathing, vomits, has pneumonia in multiple lung lobes, on death's doorstep, but once you resuscitate them, all you get is a middle finger, literally get spit on, and sometimes they'll swing at you, screaming. Not all of them are this bad, but so many of them are. Non-emergent complaints. Our emergency departments get full to the brim with patients. Wait times are long, resources are low. Some patients clog up that system with non-emergent complaints. That should be dealt with in a clinic setting, not the emergency department. Medication refills or their specialist's appointment is too far away and they want to be seen by that specialist that day, or back pain they've had for 50 years that isn't any different today than usual. Overall, it's not bad though. A patient who's even a little appreciative goes a long way in making it feel worthwhile. Being able to actually reassure someone who was just scared over something small, or getting to make a positive impact on someone's life when they have something big makes it feel worthwhile between a lot of jerks we encounter. My only thought on this is that some too many cases of people being low on their prescription might be an emergency because they might need it to live. I mean, what about drugs for diabetes? I'm pretty sure that's a thing where people need it, right? Med student here, but usually something along the lines of, are you a smoker? Nope. Have you ever smoked? Yes. How long were you smoking for? 2 packs a day for 50 years. When did you give up? 3 days ago. My partner is a doctor. She had 2 answers. First, the doorknob comment. Come for a 15-minute appointment, spend 14 minutes talking about a mild cough. Then, as she goes to leave the room, patient suddenly remembers, oh yeah, and my penis is green and smells strange. Second, having to write a medical certificate and letter for employers that require them if someone takes a day off because they're sick. Waste of everyone's time, in her opinion. Patient stated he has a cold, examined and determined that patient does indeed have a cold. Thanks for wasting my time. When they come in with non-evidence-based, unproven, and sometimes dangerous recommendations from their naturopaths, like broccoli juice cures cancer. According to my nurse girlfriend, when they bring their family member who has some medical training and that family member orders them around. Who does that? Who? You've turned me into an owl. It's not their fault. But where I come from, we have to see 40 to 60 patients in an afternoon. Time is of the essence, and we have nearly 15 minutes to interview, figure out what they have, and tell them what could be done. Because of the time frame during the interview, we need objective answers, something patients avoid like hell. We ask when the pain started, and they say, well, I was at Mary's wedding when it started. I'm thinking, who's Mary? When was it? The 28th. Of which month? I have several other patients, and I don't mean to be rude with this, but I need answers. Come to me and ask me what they could potentially have and then interrupt me because their Google PhD knows better, I guess. Animal doctor here. I hate when clients bring in their pets for a sick exam and decline all diagnostics and treatments. It's one thing if they're financially in a rough spot. I try to help them out as much as I can, but it's another when they say things like, I just don't believe in medicine, or I can fix this with coconut oil, turmeric, essential oils, crystals, and I don't trust any of your advice. I feel like I've done nothing to help their little friend, and I worry about their pet all day. Bonus anger when they want to pay for a toenail trim for $20, and the medicine they've declined is cheaper than that. I've even gotten no's when I try to give them a free trim so that I could send home meds. Not a real doctor, but a dentist here. There are a few things that irk me, but I do realize that people really do not want to come to the dentist, so I try my best to ignore most of it. So the only thing I'll say, without trying to toot my dentist horn here, is that believe it or not, a lot of the things we do in dentistry on a day-to-day basis are actually pretty difficult technically. The fact that we do it so often that it becomes routine does not change that. I realize that patients have no idea what I am doing in their mouth for the most part, but believe me when I say that mistakes within fractions of a millimeter can mean the difference between an amazing result and a catastrophic failure. As such, when patients have either a bad attitude or are not interested in trying to help me, it adds a huge degree of difficulty to something that is already hard enough. People who don't open wide on purpose, even after being asked, or keep trying to sit up and want to rinse constantly, or ones that try to grab my hand when I'm giving an injection or drilling. I'm not asking you to do or not do certain things solely for my own good. It's actually for your own good, so that I can achieve a great result for you and your dental work. And also so that I don't accidentally bury my drill into the side of your tongue or the floor of your mouth while you are squirming around. I've never had a bad time at the dentist, except for the previously stated time where they were like, I'm going to take your wisdom tooth out. I'm like, haha, no you're not. And to expand on that, the only reason I was getting abscesses where my wisdom tooth was is because it was coming in. Now that it's like fully grown in there, it doesn't do anything now. I'd say the general belief many patients have nowadays, that pain is never okay. That being sick and feeling like crap while your body heals is unacceptable. You broke your ankle. I can do lots of things to help you heal and be in less pain, but it's going to hurt. Being pain-free is impossible. You have the flu, you're going to feel like complete butt for 5 to 7 days. Feverish, achy, weak, coughing. Frankly, unless you're seriously ill, you shouldn't be contaminating your community and my waiting room. Go to bed, take Tylenol, ibuprofen, fluids, and wait. But it's not fair. We're in 2020 goddamn 4. Why don't we have flying cars or hoverboards or pills that just make us better already? I want robot arms. I want robot legs. I want to live in a cyberpunk dystopian future. God damn it. I feel like every generation has that. Like my mom's like, we were promised Back to the Future 2015, you know, hoverboards and everything. And now it's like, where's cyberpunk? When's that gonna happen? Not a doctor, but my mother is, so I heard all the stories while growing up. Here are a few things that annoy her. Arriving late to your appointment. If you arrive late and she's already behind and seeing the patient after you, she may ask you to reschedule if it's not an emergency. If you know you're going to be late, call in and let them know. It might save you a trip if the doctor is already behind, or they could tell you to come in anyway. If it's your first appointment, try to arrive at least 15 minutes early. There is going to be paperwork. It's obvious when people come in just looking to score some opiates or pain medication. It's sad and she wants wants to help, but most or all of those people are just looking to score some drugs, not get help. If for some reason you do not want a female doctor, you should tell the scheduling people when you make your appointment. It's happened a few times where a man would come in and not allow her to touch him due to religious restrictions. You just waste everyone's time with that. Don't just stop taking your meds because you start to feel better. Oftentimes, the meds are what makes you feel better, so if you stop them, you will be back to square one. Some medications need to be tapered down so it can be dangerous to go cold turkey. If you do not speak English or are calling in for someone who does not know English, please let the staff know when they schedule the appointment. The clinic is required to pay for an interpreter for you. If they show up and cannot communicate, there is not much that can be done. If this is the case, please show up because they have to pay the interpreter even if you don't show up. Pay your bills. The billing department will work with you. If you have a certain number of unpaid bills, you will not be seen. Some guy once hired one of those services that claim to reduce your medical bills by negotiating for you. That sort of thing only really works with hospitals when you don't have recurring visits. The hospital might settle for getting a lower amount rather than getting even less by selling it to a collection agency. But a clinic that you have to go back and forth to every 6 months or so will just fire you as a patient. Don't be a prick. The doctors and nurses are doing their best to help you and deserve respect. They do not have to see you, so don't go treating them like some minimum wage cashier. You should also treat cashiers with respect. Don't try and walk all over them. My mother has 5 patients who were repeatedly rude to the front end and phone personnel. There is a section in your account where the staff can put notes for everyone to see when they pull up your billing info. If you're a prick to them, it will show up there, and you will find everyone much less accommodating. At what moment did you realize your date was a horrible person? Met a guy on a dating site. He asked if I had a single friend to bring on our first meetup since his cousin was in town and wanted to come along. Sure, whatever. My friend and I was stoked and we spent time getting all cute and stuff. We were 18 or 19. The guy comes. My date says he's low on gas, so I'd need to drive. Okay. I drive a 2-door coupe, but whatever. I ask where we were going for dinner. He replies, Jack in the Box. Okay. We get there and the cousin orders 20 tacos and the rest of us order, and my date finds that he has no money in his wallet. I pay. The cousin eats all 20 tacos. I proceed to text another friend with a frantic help text. She sends me an address of a hookah lounge and says to go there. There's a group of friends there, and maybe it'll be less awkward if it's a group thing. We go. Some random dude tells my date to shotgun me. Having never done hookah before, I didn't know what this was. Date proceeds to blow hookah smoke into my mouth and try to make out with me. I decide it's time to go home and we leave. Oh, on the car ride home, we find out that the cousin is married. There wasn't a second date with either couple. That's right, believe it or not, men also use dating apps for free food and just to leech off of someone. Decided to try dating a gamer girl. She played a lot of games I liked, but she only had one dimension. Games. I tried to talk to her about college, work, family, anything. It all came back to games. About an hour in, she finally told me she left college, quit work, and lives off a portion of her grandmother's pension to sit inside all day and play games. When she asked me what I'd do if she got knocked up, and then proceeded to tell me that her mom got herself intentionally pregnant to hook her dad. Noped right out of there. She was looking at me as a wallet. Not necessarily, but probably. I was at Cal Expo with this girl I crushed hard on during homeschool, and we were sitting together and I felt like maybe we could be a thing. If so, she would be my first and I could then brag to my friends about my beautiful girlfriend. Then building up things, I wanted to kiss her, so after her forcing it out of me that I want to kiss, she says, I can't give you that, I'll think about it, leaving me with my hopes up, and then she leaves because it's getting dark. The next day, I'm excited to see her at Cal Expo again, but she's with her friend and she ditched me for around 5 hours, and I'm just moping around. No money, no girl, sadness, and then I go home. About 2 weeks of me trying to unsuccessfully contact her, her grandmother, whom she lives with, comes up to me during church and tells me that her granddaughter liked me but said that I was too short and she already had a boyfriend. She had decided to lead me on and then basically give me a giant F you, shorty, even though she was the shorter one. I'm taken and you can't do crap. Needless to say, I was devastated. Now, I'm not going to call you a liar or anything, but there is a chance that this girl wasn't stringing you along and maybe you're just bad at communication. Now, I only say that because some things in this little story are quite frankly just lacking in confirmation or detail. Like, did you make it clear this was a date? Because I wouldn't call this stringing along. This sounds like possibility and and then it's not really, and then there's stringing along, like telling you over and over again, like I could be with you, extenuating circumstances to why I can't be with you, over and over for days, for weeks. That's stringing along. This just sounds like pretty minor to me. Blind date, my kid sister set up between her coworker and me. When I arrive at her door, instead of introducing herself or even starting out with hi, the first words out of her mouth were, I've just found out I have chlamydia earlier today, so don't expect any sex later. Should have just turned right around there because the date kind of went downhill from there. Impossible though it may seem. Raucous, fake laughter, knocking over a very expensive bottle of wine on the next table as she dashed for the bathroom to retch, hitting a waiter's pants and shoes en route. Then after I cut the date short, she passed out in the car and nearly had to be carried bodily up the step to her door. A week later, she asked my sister why I hadn't called. I would say, why did she even go on the date in the first place? But I guess she needed a win? Something pleasant? I mean, like, this lady sounds like a nightmare. I thought it was when she would try to one-up anything I said by mentioning she managed a bookstore in an airport. The horrible was sealed when she thought it would be cool to talk about screwing her future brother-in-law right before the ceremony. She said she only did him once, so it was cool. I didn't think so I told her she was messed up in the head and she could probably find a book to help with that. Frickin' based. I went on a date with a guy who was in the army. At the time, he was back from his second tour and decided to take the GI Bill for school. He dropped many details about how he was chosen to guard the Saudi royal family, wore designer suits with military-grade artillery underneath. You get the idea. What made him a horrible person? He bragged about being in Afghanistan was a cakewalk, and it's nothing like what it is portrayed as on the news. He went on to tell me that due to his rank, uniformed soldiers were his protection to and from. He laughed how he would give one of his escorts the worst seat in the convoy or just make fun of them because he felt like it. Lastly, he told me how when his tour was over, he helped himself to a karaoke machine and a bunch of Xbox games because I didn't have to pay for that crap. Sounds like a major issue of ego and self-importance. I went on a date with this maths teacher. He was loud, but I figured I could look past that. We were talking about exercising at the time. I was actually about 30 pounds heavier than I am today. Out of nowhere, he says, "Oh, you're not that fat." Gee, thanks. I'm overly polite, so I kind of just ride out the date, and at the end, I dropped him back off at his car, and I was looking straight ahead and had both hands on the wheel and said goodnight. Then this guy had the audacity to ask for a kiss. I kind of fluffed it and just said, I don't kiss on the first date. Well, a woman who'll kiss on the very first date is usually a hussy, and a woman who'll kiss on the second time out is anything but fussy. But a woman who'll kiss on the third time around, head in the clouds, feet on the ground, she's the girl he's glad he's found, she's his shaboopy. My brother took one girl out on a date to a fancy restaurant one time. At the end of the meal, my brother asked why a bottle of wine on the drinks menu was so expensive, $400 a glass, and the waiter went to go fetch it to show him. It turns out it was a collector's edition of wine that came from Revolutionary-era France and was so expensive because not many bottles survived during that time and came with a certificate of authenticity when you ordered it. My brother found the story interesting, but just asked for the check and declined to order the $400 wine. The girl he was with got mad that he wasn't willing to buy her a glass of $400 wine and got up and stormed out the restaurant, saying that a real man would buy a woman what she wants. It's the origin of me and my brother's inside joke where we call anything outrageously expensive French wine. I have heard too many of these stories where it's like take someone to date at dinner and then they order a really expensive thing and just reveal themselves to be a massive jerk and a user. She told me she cheated on an ex-fiancé who lived out of state at the time with another guy because she got lonely. This was on the first date, in the first 10 minutes. I can believe that, I just don't believe that they told you in the first 10 minutes. Not me, but one of my guy friends who I originally met as the boyfriend of one of my high school friends told me that she would tell him bad things about me and our other friends, saying we're buttholes, etc., especially about her ex. She showed him a letter her ex wrote back, then thinking she can get the boyfriend to side with her more about how pathetic her ex is, and in it, he was spilling his heart out to her and forgiving her for all the bad things she did. That's when the boyfriend realized that the ex was actually a really nice nice guy and that she was the butthole of the group. Took her to prom and she told me as we pulled up,
just because we're each other's dates doesn't mean we have to dance exclusively with each other.
We went in and she left me at the door. After an hour of not seeing her, I left her there and got drunk at home. Good on you, lad. 1 year into the relationship when she became controlling and abusive. 5 years later, still just putting up with it because I need someone to cuddle occasionally and I have no friends to support me in a breakup and don't know any girls to even begin thinking about dating. Get out of that relationship right now and use all the reasons that you weren't going to get out of the relationship to motivate you to find those things that you need. All it takes is to put yourself out there a little bit. I was wearing a shirt with Han Solo on it, hoping it'd be a good entry-level nerdiness icebreaker. He said, "Oh, I like your shirt." Oh, okay, that's good. Yeah, I've seen that guy live like 4 times. Live? Yeah, Bon Jovi? Wait, no, it's not Bon Jovi. Are you messing with me? Oh, you're right. It's that guy from the movie. There were several movies. Space Wars, right? It started when she arrived early for our date. I was getting in the shower when she texted me to let me know that she was there. I let her in and explained to her that I was going to take a shower real quick. So I'm in the bathroom and have the shower running when I realize I forgot my towel. I go out of the bathroom to grab a towel and find her knuckle deep in my daughter's piggy bank. I made her leave and decided to delete my dating profile. Well, time to do what I do on every first date, arrive early and then steal from their children. Tinder date. Met her at a coffee shop, tried to recruit me into a multi-level marketing scheme. Since I wasn't completely alpha, I listened to her entire sales pitch before leaving. This happened to 2 of my dad's close friends with the same woman 30 years apart. My dad told me this story a few weeks ago. My dad's best friend took a woman to a Detroit Tigers game 30 years ago where she proceeded to get belligerent drunk and was getting into shouting matches with some of the guys sitting in front of them. She kept turning to my dad's friend, expecting him to defend her crappy behavior and fight these men he had no beef with. He was mortified, but hey, it was a Tigers game in 1984. What self-respecting Detroiter would leave? After the game, he dropped her off at home, and she cussed him out for not fighting those guys for her the whole way home. They never spoke again. Last year, a mutual friend of my dad and his best friend had gotten a divorce and was on the online dating market. He matched with this woman around his age who seemed nice enough, so they decided to meet for drinks and billiards at a local pool bar. According to him, she started drinking heavily for a woman in her early 50s right from the get-go, and wouldn't you know it, she started a number of verbal disputes with several male customers. Notice a pattern? She looks at my dad's friend, who has gone from confused at her behavior to utterly shocked, as if he's going to swoop in and defend her from these brutes. He apologizes to the men and says he's got no issue with them, pays his and his date's tab, and left. She probably had to get a cab home, but he told my dad he didn't care. She's a grown woman, and he's getting too old to deal with such childish bullcrap. When he told this story to my dad and the friend from the first story, they asked to see a picture of her. He showed them her online dating profile, and my dad's other friend erupts in laughter at the coincidence. Not only did they have nearly identical catastrophic first dates, they were both with the same woman 30 years apart. Met up with a blind date. Nice looking girl, we did our introductions, and then she asked what I do for a living. I told her, and then I asked what she did for a living, and then she says, it doesn't matter, because I'm the girl, and guys are supposed to pay for the bill anyway. She wasn't joking at all. I smiled, had a sensible chuckle, and told her to have a nice day, noped the heck out of there, and I believe she called me a couple of names as I walked off. Quickest date ever, it lasted all of 50 seconds. I've definitely had at least 5 girls tell me they flaked on another guy to go on a date with me because I asked after she already made plans with him, but she thought I was cooler and better looking. Sounds cool at first, then you realize how many times you've been flaked on and see how heartless girls can be on a whim. I probably would have just said, how long will it be until someone cooler and better looking than me comes along? And no, I'm not speaking from experience there because there is no one cooler and better looking than me. We were at the local mall and a couple walked by holding hands. One was white, the other was black. My date stopped and turns around to watch the couple as they walk away. He looks to me and says, "Man, I will never get used to that. N-word shouldn't be dating white women." I'm going to take this opportunity to say everyone should watch the film Look Who's Coming to Dinner with Sidney Poitier. I don't know if they've remade it or anything. Watch the original version though, it's a classic. When I Google searched him later just out of curiosity and found out he had been arrested for trying to run down his pregnant girlfriend with his SUV. This was after she had gotten a restraining order against him. I used to be a good church-going guy, and I once asked a girl from church if she would like to go to a hockey game and grab some pizza. I borrowed my mom's car for the day, picked her up, and we went for supper, then to the game. We lived about 35 to 40 kilometers away in another town. The seats were my father's season tickets. If you were to ask me, I would say they were not bad seats on the aisle, but also nobody beside us, a railing to rest our feet on, and a clear view of the ice from one end with nobody in front of us. We were first row on the second level. 20 minutes, I repeat, 20 minutes into the game, she says, if I'd known the seats were going to be this bad, I would have gone out with my real friends. I was so angry and hurt that I got up from my seat and said something along the lines of, well, you should get in touch with your real friends soon because you're going to need a ride home. Then I walked out. She tried to stop me, but I ignored her and walked away. I saw her a few other times, but her attempt at an apology was ignored. I'm still bitter, and it has been 21 years. What are you into? Video games, books, music, politics. I love talking about politics. Oh, yeah, I was listening to Rush Limbaugh on the drive here. I'm only saying this on a passing glance on Google at who Rush Limbaugh is. I don't know if they have any more extreme opinions about certain topics, but hey, I'm just gonna say this. If you're conservative, that doesn't make you a bad person. Stop assuming that people are bad people because they have different politics to you. And yes, the same applies to Democrats. People seriously need to start judging each other based on the actions that they take. When he talked about stuffing hookers and turning them into lamps, thanks, OK Cupid. Or the other one was when he started saying Hitler was actually misunderstood and that wouldn't it be hilarious if he firebombed my car? 0.0, I was a bait crazy 19-year-old. That's all I have to say about that. This just happened to me the other day. First time meeting someone new for drinks. For a few hours, the conversation is fine. I'm liberal and I don't want to get too far in before finding out how much we have in common. The conversation turns to the first GOP debate. I tell her that I like Bernie Sanders, obviously not in the debate. She likes Rubio. In an effort to convince me we have much in common, she begins by assuring me she has many gay friends. Okay then. Explaining why she's conservative, she says, but after working hard all day, when I go to get my nails done, I don't need to be waiting behind all these African American women with all their babies they can't afford on their Obama phones. It was such a starkly rude, offensive, and ignorant remark. I kind of thought she was making a joke. Do people really say Obama phone? I don't know if this makes her a horrible person, but I found it really offensive. He told me about how his brother hit a girl walking on the side of the road. It was dark, no streetlights, she was wearing dark clothing, the girl died. Think she was about 15. He was angry because his brother didn't get compensated for the damage done to his car. The conversation went a little bit like, dude, a family lost their daughter. Yeah, and that's sad, but what about my brother's car? This was over the span of 4 dates. She told me that her daughter's father only had supervised visits. Later in the conversation, she told me the reason his visits had to be supervised, because when the kid was 4 weeks old, she let him. And this piece of crap, this reprehensible piece of crap first-time father didn't support the baby's head properly. According to her, she insisted he was only allowed supervised visits for 4 years, for something like 3 hours per month. I don't remember the exact duration, but I know she said it was a period of so many hours per month. But then she told me, kids don't need a father anyway. I've raised my daughter pretty much alone since she was 5 months old, if not before, which she knew. She also hinted that she wanted more kids, but without explicitly saying so. A sperm donor would do. I'm pretty sure the stuff about the guy being a reprehensible piece of crap is supposed to be sarcastic. We were in line at a drive-through fast food joint for an after-bar snack. When the food wasn't ready the moment we drove up to the window, she reached over and honked the horn at them. I was mortified. Back in the days of MySpace, I scoped out this girl's page before meeting up for lunch to make sure she didn't have any screaming red flags. I made sure to reiterate that it was a strictly platonic meetup, and she agreed. She kept hitting on me the entire time. I tried to change the subject to small talk, and she mentioned that she was a single child from absentee parents, blah blah, pity party. These were all lies, since her very public MySpace page showed wonderful family outings with very seemingly involved parents and a handful of siblings. I avoided her around campus the rest of my college career, and she could never figure out why. Not as bad as some, but when I was 17, I met a guy at the farmer's market who was older, 23, and we decided to go out for coffee during the day. So we met up, had a nice chat. Afterwards, we went for a walk and he tried to kiss me. After politely rejecting him, he kept trying. I know I should have been firm with him and told him that it made me uncomfortable, but I was afraid to upset him. We had taken his car to a nearby park, and we were somewhat alone. I didn't return his phone calls or anything after that. It wasn't necessarily one moment, but a series of god-awful events that tipped me off. So, guy asks me out on a date as a present for my birthday. Yeah, he was my birthday present. Should have known right then. We go out to lunch, I get stuck paying for the meal and most of his, and am told that I am being kind of stingy with the tip. I put $4 down and my sandwich was only $8, but okay, whatever. So he asked me to go to a movie after, but he doesn't want to drive because his truck is bad on gas. I can't drive because my parents won't let me give people rides. He doesn't care, so he tries to pressure me into driving him anyway. I won't, so he throws a fit and gets into his car. So I get into his truck and, being the pushover that I was at the time, apologize that he had to drive. He huffs and goes, "Well, you know what? The least that you could do is give me gas money." This dude asked me out and basically complained the entire time that I was a pain in the butt. I can't remember if there were worse people than this, but already the fact that they're like, "I'm your present, my darling," is like, ugh. He pushed back the time of our date by an hour at the last minute. When I got to the restaurant, I walked inside and he was nowhere to be found. I called him. Turns out he was at a bar down the road and told me to just come there instead. I didn't know exactly where it was and he gave me bad directions. When I got there, he had already eaten. He spent most of the night watching the TV at the bar and ignoring everything I said. This girl I was with started talking about her birthday when she told me that she's had bikinis and muscles at her birthday party since she was 10. When I asked her about 10-year-olds being ripped, she responded with, "Well, yeah, I don't hang out with the losers." I laughed, and then she told me that she was serious and that she only hung out with cool people. I was like, nah. What? What was banned at your school and why? Flipping water bottles. They had ledges for windows above the doors and people were throwing water bottles up there and getting them stuck. So if you flip a water bottle, you get in trouble. That's stupid. Not just the punishment for it, but just the fact that people do that for entertainment. Animals. Somebody thought it would be funny to organize an unofficial bring your pet to school day as a senior prank, and the result was that everybody with allergies nearly died. Manga. Because in the opinion of the vice principal, it was all smut. That is so lame. This wasn't at my school, but at the rival middle school across town. They put a ban on the word kill. Teachers couldn't even use it in their lectures. Apparently, someone or a few people told one girl to delete herself, and she got triggered and went to guidance complaining about it. Then the principal put a ban on the word kill. I understand banning swear words. I understand being like, hey, don't say, like, you know, poop or fornicate in the swearing way, because I swear a fair bit. I try not to, because it's not very classy. Cooking is an impractical art. Today, everyone can just buy pre-made meals and no one has time to cook, or they could be smart and hire a personal chef. This boiled my blood. Who the heck says this? Cooking is so a practical art. Way to go, jackhole principal, or whatever you call him. Teaching children that laziness is the key to society, that it can just be done for you. So wait, like cooking was like banned at the school? I mean, children shouldn't really be cooking at school because all kinds of things could go wrong unless under supervision. Like imagine if that was the general rule, school dinners consisting of, I don't know, cold pre-packaged pigs in a blanket or something, or like, I don't know, sushi meal packs that you can get from the store. Overall though, yeah, that is kind of telling kids like, yeah, be lazy, don't learn how to cook or anything like that. I love cooking. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 8th grade. Most makeup could only wear mascara and had to be upperclassmen. Those finger fortune tellers because it was related to witchcraft, but literally Catholicism is the most superstitious out of the demographics. Like, we bury a statue of Joseph to help sell our house. Now, is that not also witchcraft? Any sweatshirts that didn't have the school's logo, purses? I mean, it was Catholic school, so there's not much to get banned anyways. I wouldn't say Catholicism Catholicism is the most superstitious. I'm pretty sure all religions, if you look enough into them, have really weird rules and at least believe in some form of superstition or just some absolute bollocks. I can't possibly remember all of the dumb rules, but in middle school we weren't allowed to wear hats, carry backpacks, leave the cafeteria during lunch, or walk back to our lockers to pick up something we forgot at the end of the day. After we'd already walked to the front of the school, they were afraid we were going to be doing illegal substance deals back there. This was an affluent suburb. I was once sitting in the front hallway waiting for my friend who I was going to hang out with after school. Eventually, she, a white girl, came out, but then realized she'd forgotten her binder, so she begged to be allowed to go back and get it. They begrudgingly let her. Then, a few minutes later, a black boy also asked to go back to his locker, and they said no. One of the middle schools I went to banned all backpacks that weren't either mesh or clear plastic, which led to crappy backpacks that had to be replaced every couple of months, because adults had to be able to make sure that you weren't carrying anything illegal or had weapons. The school had a problem with a couple of rival gangs, and having nearly 3,000 kids packed into a school designed for 1,000 at the most, so part of it made sense, but the backpacks we were allowed were so utterly pieces of crap because they were so cheaply made. My high school got rid of soda machines, which if you dug up a yearbook from 6 or so years ago, there were pictures of those soda things you find at gas stations and most restaurants, and there used to be a vending machine that sold candy and soda. So they banned students from bringing in baked goods to celebrate birthdays as well as candy for health reasons. The utterly hilarious thing about these bans was that we had what was called the senior store, where candy, soda, energy drinks, and just about everything banned for health reasons could be obtained. So they didn't ban it, they just made it that you had to pay them for the stuff that you wanted. That kind of makes sense. I mean, I'm pretty sure on a lot of those vending machines, it's like people come and collect the money from them. I'm not entirely sure about the logistics of it, but I'm pretty sure the school doesn't own those machines really, which would make even more sense as to why they would just set up a store for you to get these things, because if someone damages those machines, I'm pretty sure the school has to do something about it rather than the people who manufactured it. Yeah, nothing here sounds terribly bad, especially when it's like, oh, the area is known for rival gangs and stuff, which at least a few, maybe more kids could potentially be a part of. So nothing here is egregious really to me, but yeah, as someone attending the school, I can see why it's man, this is annoying. My middle school banned anything that had artificial scents. This includes body spray, perfume, cologne, scented deodorant, and scented hand sanitizer. This was in 8th grade. We never could put on sprays during school because some kids would go overboard, but with the addition of the new rule, we couldn't even wear it to school. One girl said, "Can I wash my hair with scented shampoo?" The teacher replied with, "Yes." She then asked, "Then why can't I wear perfume?" The teacher had no idea what to say and blamed it on the handbook. No, yeah, I kind of get that one, because I remember being in high school and people spraying way too much deodorant and guys with asthma being "Oh, you're killing me!" Counter-Strike 1.6. They initially thought deleting and reformatting every PC in the school would help, but it just kept coming since most of us had it on our flash drives. It got serious to a point that a kid would be suspended if he was caught playing it. Maybe it's because I'm a gamer, but I always kind of thought that, I don't know, you could have video games in school, it could work if you just placed a heavy rule on it, an asterisk, there is a time and place for this sort of thing. I think games can be used to help educate people in things like teamwork, working together. It can also be a good way for kids to find common ground with each other. I don't know, that's just my thought on it. I'm probably wrong, I'm not a teacher. That, and I am too used to, at least in my experience of high school, people having an opportunity to do something cool and then squandering it and ruining it for everyone else. This is actually a personal one, and it applied more to a class than an entire school, where we used to go up to the hills for a certain class and we were learning how to accurately read maps, and we would go off in groups, and one group decided, and it was full of jerks and one kind of semi-annoying guy, because no one got to pick their groups, and they decided to desert this semi-annoying guy, in which we came back, it was where is he? We left him, and then we had to go find him, and when we got back to the bus, we were told, yeah, we're never doing this again, you've squandered this opportunity, why did you do that, you're stupid. Water guns. I did my last 2 years of high school in a Catholic school in Miami. During my senior year, I found my younger brother's water gun in my backpack. No idea why it was there, but anyone with multiple siblings know you find random things in random places. So I decided to fill it up with water, pull my sweater's sleeves, yes, it was 90-something degrees outside, but indoors was Arctic over the water gun so you couldn't see it, and proceeded to walk the halls while randomly shooting it in the air, confusing people as I went. I got the bright idea to start actually shooting my friends in the face, because why not? I somehow had sniper-ready skills and was able to get you down the hole right in the eye, which became a standing challenge to all the guys since I'm a chick and damn that Latino machismo and Catholic upbringing. The next day, a couple of other seniors brought in little water guns and attacked people. The following day, a few more, to the point of the seniors running up and down the halls, stairs, jumping into classrooms, hiding around corners just for the perfect shot. The underclassmen thought they could get in on the action until we declared that if a senior caught you with one, we could confiscate it and then drench you with it. We were able to get away with our water war for exactly 1 week before the buzzkill dean of students announced that anyone caught with a water gun would be suspended. Licorice. We would buy the licorice from the tuck shop, the type that had 3 or 4 strings together and be long enough to swing. We would run around during lunch swatting each other with them. One day they just stopped selling and stocking them. That's when we started using those weeds with the big bindies on the end again, the ones that would dig and get stuck in your skin. Wearing red or blue shirts. I grew up in an area that was gang infested. It was so bad that some of the kids in elementary school and middle school were a part of those gangs. They also had locker checks for illegal substances and weapons. High security with fences in school grounds. This was in the late 90s to early aughts. I remember in elementary school they banned Happy Crack, which was basically just a bag of anything powdery and sweet mixed together. Go to school with a few packets of Kool-Aid, Pixie Sticks, and sugar, no one would care. Mix it together in a bag and it'd be a problem. Everyone would just eat the stuff. All it took was that one kid who snorted it to ruin the fun for everyone. In hindsight, it was probably a lot better for my health that the kid snorted that crap. Amen to that, brother. I was from an all-girls Catholic secondary school, and in our second year, the discipline master imposed a ridiculous no hugging for more than 30 seconds rule. Not sure why they started the rule, but it was rumored that they caught 2 girls getting it on in one of the bathroom stalls. Not surprising, all the girls knew it was a thing and were cool with it, and relationships were common, like any other school. Being an all-girls school, we were all super comfy with each other, and hugging your friends was common. So despite the rule, we'd purposely hug each other in front of the teachers and just stay there, casually counting to 30. Pennies were banned at my school. We had this weird kid we all called Crazy Larry. Every week freshman year, this kid Larry would leave pennies in random places. In lockers, on desks, lunch trays, you name it. This persisted for 2.5 years. Junior year rolled around, and evidently a member of one of Larry's math class so happened to go to the bathroom right after Larry had left to do so. What he saw was almost unimaginable. Larry had been stuffing pennies by the roll up his butt. He would then go throughout his day and leave pennies anywhere he saw fit. You know, find a penny, pick it up all day long, you'll have good luck. I've lost my faith in that now. Thanks, Larry. Crazy Bones. Tiny collectible plastic figures of random things like sharks, aliens, and sludge monsters. This was in primary school, aged 7 to 11 for those of you not from the UK, and they were insanely popular with pretty much every kid in this age group in my area. Kids being kids, it wasn't long before we were stealing them from each other, which it seemed like the teachers could mostly put up with, but even so, a few whole school assemblies were held over this. However, the last straw was one particular bullying incident where an 8-year-old had one shoved up his butt and had to go to the hospital. Letters were sent out to parents, and every school in the country banned us from taking them into school. Ah, those were the good old days. Goddamn, I remember Crazy Bones. I thought this was just kind of nice. I was like, oh yeah, I remember Crazy Bones. They were great. Used to flick them at each other, like line them up like little bowling pins and stuff, and see how many you could lock down by flicking one at them, and then nope, up the butt it goes. God damn, I wasn't expecting that. Now I'm just wondering, why the hell did the school go ban the Crazy Bones? It's the Crazy Bones' fault. Like, I'm sure that boy got reprimanded, sent to a juvenile detention center, removed from public school, as they probably should be. But why you gotta hate on the Crazy Bones? Pokemon cards were banned around 2003 because people were getting into fights, stealing them from each other, and trading them for more money than kids should have. I went to school in Jordan, so naturally we're all businessmen. After they banned it, a sort of black market emerged with code words and dealers that went by pseudonyms. We'd meet the guys in charge in between the trees in a hidden spot, and that's where the exchange would happen. It became a sort of mafia, a mafia run by 11 11-year-olds. Pogs, specifically the slammers, keenies we called them. People in our school would sharpen the metal ones in metalworking and technology class and throw them at each other. Toilet doors, to allow teachers to check if students were doing illegal substances in said toilets. I don't go to the school anymore, but my youngest sister says they are now banned from going inside at break times. Now, my school did have a serious illegal substance issue for a few years that ended up with 2 kids committing self-deletion after getting caught by their parents. After someone put Halo Combat Evolved on the network drive and it started to rival Microsoft Word for most used software in the building, they had to ban that. Unfortunately, the person responsible for making the announcement had the computer literacy of a mountain goat. So the official rule was something like, don't be downloading Halo websites on the computers. I don't know how long ago this person might have been referring to this, but like, goddamn, kids are so lucky nowadays to have a school where it's like, oh, at least your computers can play frickin' Halo or something. We were lucky enough if Happy Wheels frickin' worked on a good day on the school computers. Nipple cripples. A weird dude in my class got a lot of laughs by letting people give him nipple cripples. Apparently, after repeated and increasingly hard nipple cripples, the connective tissues behind his nipple broke. So this guy could literally stretch his nipples 5 to 6 inches off his chest. Obviously, being a teenager and a weird one at that, he went around showing everyone and their mother his new ability. He got warned about it several times, and the final straw was when he was seen by the administration with an equally weird girl sucking his nipples 5 to 6 inches off his chest. Oh my god. They immediately banned nipple cripples, but there was really no need. We were all pretty scarred by what we had seen from this kid. I can't believe I'm about to do this, but for those of you asking what this looked like, the best I can describe it would be an upside down funnel. When he would pull on the nipple, all the loose skin surrounding it would come off of his chest, and a sort of cone-shaped base would comprise the first 3 inches, and the rest did pretty much look like a penis nipple. It was probably a decent 3 to 4 inch diameter circle around his nipples of broken connective tissue, so I promise you, it came off his chest a solid 5 to 6 inches over 3 sports seasons during 3 years of high school. I can also tell you that it got to that point aggressively. He was literally tugging on that nip in the locker room every day, stretching it out, but who am I to judge, I guess? You could only kind of tell that it was messed up before he would pull on it. I'm not sure if that would eventually repair itself or just sort of sagged in the grossest way possible as he gets older. I hope you're happy now. I'm going to have PTSD nightmares tonight. Now, I only call them nipple cripples, which is what we call them in England, or at least that's what a lot of people I know call them in England, because they were calling them TT twisters, and I'm pretty sure TT, if you know what I'm trying to say, there is a no-no word on YouTube now because of all the goddamn rules of censorship and stuff. Google. Our high school had some kind of contract with this really crappy school-appropriate search engine called NetTrekker. They banned using Google in school because it wasn't scholarly. Only NetTrekker was allowed. They tried extending this to beyond the school. They wanted us to use only NetTrekker for internet searches outside of school and sent home a pamphlet about internet rules outside the classroom. They said that the students shouldn't have Android phones. I got a referral to having a Moto X smartphone. This was in 2015. Two-way hallways. Sounds crazy, right? The principal and his staff thought that it'd be a smart idea to have one-way hallways in order to cut down student traffic. If your locker was right around the corner and you had to go against the traffic in order to get there, you had to walk all the way around. If you passed your class on the way to your locker, you had to make 2 circles around the building. This significantly increased tardiness and write-ups. Terrible idea. Maybe I would make an okay principal. I wouldn't make a decision that stupid. At least I say that, but ultimate power corrupts absolutely, and as we are all aware, I'm sure, there is no power quite so ultimate as that of a school principal. Looney Tunes characters on your clothes. It was the 90s at a crappy school. Bionicles. We would smash them together, and whoever's helmet fell off first was the loser. So many bloody hands in 4th grade. Any liquid, not in a clear plastic bottle, and then the only liquid we could have was water. The ban was because a girl in my grade got caught with vodka in a clear plastic bottle. Everyone in my school never understood the ban because vodka is clear like water, and the only reason the teacher even caught onto her was because another dumb kid was joking around about alcohol, and the idiot with the vodka threw the bottle away in the garbage next to the teacher's desk. Sack whacking. Guys would hit each other in the balls as a prank or whatever. Apparently, it was causing a big enough problem that the entire school had to attend an assembly where the deputy principal informed everyone there has been a large outbreak of sack whacking. Entire school was laughing so hard, even the deputy, who was a really strict and uptight guy, started laughing his butt off. We were also banned from playing with large balls, basketballs, soccer balls, etc. at the same assembly. That was also received very well. Yogurt eating contests were immediately banned at my high school when an overzealous football lineman vomited about a quart of yogurt and then attempted to re-eat the yogurt to win the contest. Domino vomit effect throughout the cafeteria. Now hold on a second. What all of you may be thinking, and what the person who witnessed this may be thinking as well, is this guy is disgusting. I say, this young man has exactly what we need to take us to state, people! Candy necklaces at my middle school. One day a couple of my friends came into the playground before school started with a candy necklace each. We immediately got everyone's attention after we all demanded to know where they got them and how much they cost from the corner shop down the street in 10p as I recall. One or two others said they might go and get one for themselves before school started. That might go turned into them sprinting to the shop once one kid figured out how to weaponize them, holding one piece of candy between their teeth, stretching forward the elastic and biting down. It would cannonball pieces of candy at whatever it was aimed at. That morning, a few kids bought a candy necklace each and played a game of firing bits at each other. The next morning, all 400 kids that attended that school were engaged in all-out necklace war. Every single one of us must have had at least one and our own technique for maximizing the firing rate. After doing our best recreation of trench warfare all morning and having the kind of fun that only comes with an entire playground full of kids all playing the same game, we were all ushered into the assembly hall to be told that candy necklaces were now banned. Nobody lost an eye, just in case you were wondering. I think I really vaguely remember people doing that with candy necklaces as well, but I don't think it ever caught on big enough that it became something that got banned. Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, and Pokemon cards. Some of the kids at school started trading and selling them during lunch, but it got so bad as the kids were actually selling stolen cards they got from other students. My friend was swirly one morning for his deck, and later that day he saw a kid with his Dark Magician card. He knew it was his because he had a tendency to chew the ends of his cards. The teachers put a stop to all of it, including playing the card games and bringing them on school grounds. And here I am once again just thinking to myself, what would really happen if you just removed the children from the situation that were causing all of the problems? Would perhaps many children be deprived of a proper education? Maybe. In middle school, they banned the jersey of a Japanese baseball player on the Chicago Cubs. The vice principal believed that Fukudome was actually a joke, and he believed it said, "F you, do me." True story. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.